All right, I'm off. I'll be back on the 31st. Make sure to finish year-end cleaning by then. Today, my husband heads out for a 3-night, 4-day affair trip to South. I realized 3 months ago that my husband was having an affair with my best friend. Got it. I'll make sure everything's clean so we can start the new year with clean slate. I've always forgiven my husband for relying on me for household chores and finances since we got married, thinking, he's young, it's okay. But I'm no saint. Once I knew about the betrayal and couldn't trust him anymore, my love dried up instantly. Take care. I'll bring back some souvenirs. I smiled brightly as I saw him off, and the moment the door closed, I called my brother. Since he'll be gone for 4 days, I started preparing to throw away my marriage life along with my husband's belongings while doing the big cleanup. The New Year's plan starts on New Year's Day, as they say. I'll do my best to ensure that my husband and best friend's start of the year is the best it can be. My name is Yvonne, I got married at 26, and I'm about to celebrate my second New Year. I met my husband, who is 2 years younger than me, and Alex at work. My husband joined the department at the company where I work as a new grad. He was a handsome guy with soft features and smooth skin that even I, as a woman, admired. He was bright and innocent, well liked by both male and female colleagues. Our company has a 3-month training period where new employees learn on the job with a mentor. My husband's mentor, Ian, was strict with both others and himself. I often saw my husband getting scolded and feeling down. Good job today. Are you getting used to it? Ian is strict, but he's good at his job, so if you trust and follow him, you'll definitely grow. Yes. I feel embarrassed of my inability, and I regret it every day. Everyone feels that way at first. Keep it up. I sat next to him and was asked by Ian to support my husband daily. He was slow to learn, but once he got it, I could rely on him completely. Ian said you've been growing a lot recently. Here, this is a reward. Oh. Chocolate? Looking at a few pieces of chocolate in his palm, my husband smiled. Yeah. It's good with coffee. Chocolate is great for a tired brain. Thank you so much. I'm always saved by you, Hashimoto. After the training ends, please let me treat you to a meal. His cute neutral smile was like an angel's. As the eldest of 3 siblings and someone who grew up being reliable, I never considered younger men as romantic prospects. But that innocent smile unexpectedly made my heart flutter. I had thought his invitation was just polite talk, but a month after the training ended, it became reality, and half a year later, he confessed to me, and we started dating. Yvonne, you're a dependable woman, but sometimes you seem a bit vulnerable, and I just want to protect you. I've never been told that before. Being serious and inexperienced in love, maybe I felt a bit more comfortable because he was younger. When we were alone, he would openly show his affection, and all I had to do was accept it. I really feel at ease when Yvonne is with me. Even when he stayed over, I would sleep holding him close. The way he would entwine his arms around me or ask to be held in my arms, the roles seemed reversed, and I found it refreshingly adorable. But what's amazing about him is not just how affectionate he is, but also how he knows how to pamper me, with my eldest sibling mentality. Good morning. I tried making a breakfast like what you'd get at a cafe this morning. Good morning. Wow. It really is like a cafe breakfast. Would you like coffee or tea, princess? Occasionally treating me like a princess always made my heart skip a beat. When I was feeling down about a mistake at work, he would casually take me for a drive to the beach on the weekend, listening to my complaints while driving. Then, while watching the sea, he would pat my head and pull me close, like he would comfort a small child. It might be said he's experienced with women, but for someone like me who didn't know how to be affectionate, he taught me the joy of being a woman. And a year later, he proposed, and we got married. With that, I moved to the second building, a station away from the main office. Because I wanted to continue working after marriage, and I was happy he supported that. But it was a bit later that I realized that this reason was a manifestation of his hidden true nature. Even after marriage, he remained kind, but his way of showing affection changed a bit. Like I was being gently rolled in the palm of his hand. "Yvonne, you're such a good wife. You're tidy and a great cook. I'm really happy I married you. Thank you for everything." "Yeah. I'm happy too. It's not just that he's good at showing affection, he really understands me." Maybe it was because I couldn't let go of my stance as the older one. Even though we both worked, I realized that all the household chores had become my job. My husband would put his dirty clothes in the laundry basket and his dishes in the sink, and he didn't mess up the room. So, it wasn't too stressful, but he never took the initiative to do chores. The only exception was on weekends we spent together. He would make breakfast and say, "Sorry, I always end up relying on Yvonne when I get home. I can only relax in front of you," as he smiled and poured me fresh coffee. With gestures like these, even if I sometimes thought, "Why do I have to do everything?" I ended up forgiving him. It's like after we got married, my husband had become like a well-behaved son. If this was all calculated, he'd be quite the strategist. Another thing that made me feel like I was falling into my husband's trap was the household finances. Instead of splitting everything 50/50ths, I ended up paying more like 70/30ths. This was partly because we started our married life by moving my husband into the apartment I was living in, and I had often paid for things as his senior before we started dating. The rent and utilities will be deducted from Yvonne's account, so I'll cover the groceries and other monthly expenses. Until we find a new place and move, that's okay, right? Okay. But we'll continue to pay our own insurance and phone bills as before, right? Of course. My 2-bedroom apartment was close to our company and reasonably sized. Even though we were both working, the utilities hadn't gone up much, but something didn't quite sit right with me. But I believed and turned a blind eye thinking, this is only until we have kids or until we move to a new place. Looking back, I might have been enabling my husband's dependency. The increase in household chores made me feel the reality of being married, but it seemed like my husband's life hadn't changed much from when he was single. My husband, who has many friends, would go out drinking after work or go out on weekends. After paying his share of the household expenses, he would spend all his remaining money on hobbies and fun, with no savings at all. His family lived about an hour away by plane, and we needed to save for visits home. 3 months into our marriage, feeling anxious, I suggested to my husband, "Hey, considering our future moves and having kids, let's start saving together." "Well, I kind of remain living like this for now, but if you thinks we should, then let's do it." I end up spending everything if left to my own devices. Great. How about $600 each per month? $600, huh? Well, can't help it. Okay. I was worried he might be reluctant, but I was relieved my husband agreed to save. I thought it was impossible to handle the future savings for both of us on my own. Despite some complaints about my husband, he would reserve one day of the weekend for me and invite me out for meals or trips on anniversaries. We were getting along pretty well. One day, I got a call from my best friend Mary, who had attended our wedding. Mary got married right after graduating from college and became a stay-at-home mom, so we hadn't been in touch much for the last few years. "Thanks for inviting me to your wedding. It's been a while, can we meet up sometime? We didn't get to talk much at the ceremony." "Yeah, I'd love to see you too. But Mary, can you make it out? Isn't Anna only 4 years old?" "It's fine. I'll have my parents watch her for a day." "Oh. And my mom says congratulations. She was really happy about your marriage, Yvonne." Mary was a co-worker from our college days, a year younger than me, but we hit it off from the first time we met. At one point, we were inseparable, visiting each other's homes and getting to know each other's parents. "Ah. Sorry, I need to bathe Anna soon. It's a good day for me though." We decided to meet the following Saturday and hung up. I was so happy to have a chance to talk with Mary after such a long time. Today, I got in touch with my best friend Mary who came to our wedding. I'm going to meet her next week. "Oh. Mary, who is that again?" "Remember, the one who got married right after college." We talked about how she still looks cute even as a mom. Really? Sorry, I don't remember much. Have fun though. On our wedding day, my husband was like, "Is she really a mom?" And it seemed like we had a good time talking about it. But, it's probably hard to remember everyone when you meet so many friends and acquaintances at once. At this moment, I couldn't see through the lie my husband told. The next week, when I arrived at the cafe where we agreed to meet, Mary was there waiting, looking slim as ever with her wavy hair looking cute. The only change was that she was wearing flats. It felt like turning back time, and we rejoiced at our reunion, screaming and grabbing each other's hands. Yvonne's husband is such a cutie. What do you call him? Probably just Alex? He's younger and so cute, but I just call him Alex. Mary was eager to hear about my husband, so we indulged in bragging about how cute my husband is, which we usually couldn't do, and had a blast. It felt nostalgic, passionately talking about our faves like we used to in our student days. Mary seemed to be happily living in her newly built home. Don't let your guard down just because you're married, Yvonne. Make sure you keep a tight grip on Alex. Otherwise, someone might snatch him away. Right, he's such a cutie, I'll be careful. We joked around until we parted, and I had the best day. This was the first time I could honestly brag about my husband to someone else. I truly thought that once we had kids, I'd want our families to hang out together. I never imagined someone would actually try to take my husband away. 2 years into our marriage, on a particular Sunday, I was having lunch at a fancy hotel restaurant with 4 girlfriends. A friend who works overseas was back in town, so we gathered for the first time in a while. The restaurant, located on a high floor, was so popular you couldn't get in without a reservation on weekends. After we finished eating and were talking about moving to a nearby cafe because we still had so much to chat about. That's when I saw him. My husband, his arm around a woman's shoulder, looking like a couple in love. Why? Next to my husband stood Mary, slim as ever, looking great in a light beige dress and her wavy hair. I felt the blood drain from my face. Even if they met by chance, you can't get into this place without a reservation. I lied to my friends, saying I suddenly felt ill, and left alone. The image of those two stuck with me even after I got home. My husband had said he was going to a day spa with college buddies. The thought that it was definitely an affair echoed in my head, but I couldn't bring myself to believe it. Could I have been mistaken? My husband was supposed to have forgotten Mary. But then, I heard Alex from the direction where the two of them were walking closely. I recognized that name. That night, when my husband came home, he smelled of nice soap. But I knew it wasn't from the spa. Man, I'm beat from the trip and the hot spring. Gonna head to bed early tonight. He had no idea I was onto him. As I watched a movie alone in the living room, he hugged me from behind and kissed my cheek, saying, "Good night." I shivered. If it had been the day before, I might have felt loved by that gesture. But thinking with the hands that held Mary, I just couldn't anymore. I waited for my husband to start snoring, then I took my smartphone out of the bedroom. If it hadn't changed, the password would be our wedding anniversary. It opened. Checking the message exchanges, it was worse than I expected. They had been in contact since our wedding day. At the venue, Mary had secretly passed him a note with her contact information. "Alex, it's been a while. You've become more handsome than I imagined. I never thought you'd become Yvonne's husband." I was surprised too. "Mary, you've become prettier than before. I had no idea you were Yvonne's best friend. Hey, how about we meet up, just the two of us, after such a long time?" Yes, they were ex-girlfriend and ex-boyfriend. I had heard about it from Mary. "There's this beautiful boy in this year's freshman, and even though he's a year younger, we started dating." That was Alex. But, as far as I remembered, their relationship didn't last more than half a year. As I followed the messages, it appeared they had been meeting up 2 to 3 times a month for the past 2 years. The realization that I had been betrayed all this time brought tears to my eyes. I thought I was happy, I thought we were doing well, but it seems I was the only one who thought so. Oh, no. The betrayal by my husband shattered my heart. Realizing how much I loved him made my chest hurt. I curled up on the floor, sobbing quietly. After a good cry, my mind started to regain some composure. Was I really the only one who thought we were happy? By marrying an older woman who would do anything he said, perhaps it was my husband who actually secured a comfortable and happy life. If we both thought we were happy, was it a win-win situation? That can't be right, give me a break, I muttered to myself and decided to take revenge on my husband and best friend. They had planned a trip together 3 months later, and I decided to bring their downfall at that time. It was clear how much I was being underestimated. Their plan for 3 months later was a 4-day trip to South at the end of December. The next day, I left work early and visited a private detective agency I had researched. I wanted to gather conclusive evidence within these 3 months. I asked them to investigate, focusing on the weekends he didn't spend with me. The agency told me to act normally around my husband until the results came out, which was a kind of hell in its own way. Every touch reminded me of his relationship with Mary, sending shivers down my spine. Disgusting. Even when he smiled sweetly, tilting his head cutely, I felt nothing. It was as if a filter had been removed, and all I felt was disgust. About a month later, the agency contacted me. They had taken a large number of photos that served as definitive evidence of their affair. Since reuniting with my husband, Mary had been pretending to go to her part-time job on weekends after leaving her daughter with her parents. Surprisingly, most of the expenses for their dates were covered by Mary. This was the same Mary who had always been good at being spoiled, claiming, "It's common sense for the man to pay." And there were photos of her giving him an allowance at the end of their dates, which somehow fully woke me up. With the investigation results in hand, I went to my parents' house. I planned to tell them everything, but my younger brother Kate was there too, so I involved him as well. I shared the whole situation, my desire to divorce my husband, and my plans for revenge. Showing them the evidence photos, my father's face turned red with anger. "Get a divorce and come back home right now." My father was shaking with fury, ready to confront my husband, so the 3 of us desperately stopped him. "Dad, let's go with my sister's plan. It's more peaceful than a fight, and revenge sounds fun. I'll help too." He was probably trying to lighten the mood. My college student brother's casual words felt like a rescue. As I shared my plan for revenge, the 3 of us got more excited about it. "Oh. Then, let's invite Sally for a fun family trip. I'll call her." In the end, we also invited my sister Sally, and a fun family trip for the end of the year was arranged. Somehow, I started looking forward to the end of the year. In December, my husband told me, "I'm going on a trip with my college buddies at the end of the year." What? During the holidays? Yeah, one of them is having a small wedding ceremony. We decided to join in and make a trip out of it, all at our own expense. While I was impressed by his clever excuse, I tried to stop him. "Really, do you have to go? It's the end of the year. Who's more important to you, me or your friend?" I tried to sound a bit mean, but my husband seemed not to notice. Instead, he looked surprised, as I rarely make a fuss. "Oh. Sorry. You're more important to me, but attending a friend's wedding isn't something that happens often. Please forgive me." He's willing to beg just to go on this affair trip with Mary. Somewhere deep down, I had been hoping that during these 3 months, my husband would stop his affair with Mary. Maybe I wanted to steer my feelings toward not divorcing. But now, any doubts had disappeared. December 28th, the day of the trip. Today, my husband leaves for a 3-night, 4-day affair trip to a southern country. How many times I wanted to kick him as he happily prepared the night before. "Well, I'm off. I'll be back on the 31st. Sorry, but please finish year-end cleaning." "Got it. I'll make sure everything's clean so we can start the new year off right." I've always forgiven my husband for relying on me for household chores and finances since we got married, thinking, he's young, it's okay. But I'm no saint. Once I knew about the betrayal and couldn't trust him anymore, my love dried up instantly. Take care. I'll bring back some souvenirs. I smiled brightly as I saw him off, feeling annoyed as he hugged me one last time. The moment the door closed, I called my brother Ken. Hey, Ken? He's gone now, so any time is good. I'm going to move out. Since he'll be gone for 4 days. I decided to throw away our marital life along with my husband's belongings while doing the big cleanup. The New Year's plan starts on New Year's Day, as they say. I'll do my best to ensure that my husband and best friend's start of the year is the best it can be. Then, our family helped move my belongings to the new place we had arranged. Since it was originally my apartment, the only things we had replaced when we got married were the bed and the fridge. I decided to get rid of them since I didn't want to see them anymore. My husband's belongings were mostly clothes and hobby items. I disposed of the gifts I had given him, and for the rest, since I didn't have any boxes or large bags, I put them in trash bags for burnable trash. In the middle of the now empty room, devoid of my husband's belongings, I left a filled-out divorce paper, the rings, and a photo of him and Mary sharing a passionate kiss. Well, what's next? After the move, I made a few calls. Caught up in the whirlwind of moving, we went out as a family to a barbecue restaurant, indulging in plenty of meat and alcohol. My husband sent a photo of a beautiful villa with a "We've arrived" message, but I ignored it. December 29th. I visited Mary's parents' house. It's been about 5 years since I last visited, back when we were students. Yvonne, long time no see. I heard you got married. I even invited Mary's husband, Tom. What's going on? Urged by her aunt, I went to the living room, where Mary's uncle and her husband, Tom, were chatting on the sofa. Their daughter, Anna, seemed to be napping in the next room on a futon. Despite the peaceful family scene, I felt guilty. Mary has been having an affair with my husband. Were you aware of this? They are currently on a trip together. That's a lie. No, no. In front of Mary's astonished family, I laid out the evidence of the affair and explained everything. When I showed them the screenshots of their email conversations, Tom's face turned grim. So that's what was happening. I thought it was strange she suddenly started taking extra shifts on weekends. She told me she was going back to her parents today to help with the year-end cleaning. Mary has also been giving my husband an allowance. If you're considering divorce, Tom, I have these photos as evidence. Thank you. I won't forgive them for abandoning Anna and having an affair. Tom's voice trembled with anger. Mary's uncle and aunt began to prostrate themselves in tears before Tom and me. I was relieved Anna hadn't woken up. I talked about divorcing my husband and leaving him homeless. I think I want to do the same. Father-in-law, mother-in-law, please support us too. Tom and I exchanged contact information and I left Mary's parents' house. The extent to which an affair can hurt those around them. Thinking about the two of them enjoying their trip made my blood boil. December 30th. The day before his return. Tomorrow, we are set to go on a family trip. Everything from the inn to the flights has been booked for 3 months. During the move, I happened to check our joint savings account and saw that half of the saved amount had been withdrawn. Nearly 2 years had passed, and the savings account had accumulated over $20,000. Taking half means the rest is mine, right? I was disappointed, but this allowed me to use the remaining amount without any reservations. Hello, is this my mother-in-law? It's Yvonne. I'm planning to spend New Year's with my family at a tourist spot in my husband's hometown. We're thinking of going to a hot spring in there from tomorrow. I have something I want to discuss in person, so would it be alright if I stopped by for a bit during the New Year's holiday? Oh. Alex hasn't mentioned anything. Are you two coming? No, I'll be with my family. There's something I need to discuss about Alex. Sensing something ominous, my mother-in-law simply answered, understood. Then, I'll visit in the evening. Have a happy new year. With that, almost everything was prepared. As a final touch, I sent a photo to my husband via email that night, showing the back of a man and a woman. Though it was just their backs, the side profiles were unmistakably my husband and Mary. Tomorrow, we leave on an early flight, so I decided to go to bed early. December 31st, New Year's Eve, the day of his return. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was flooded with messages and missed calls. Not wanting to deal with the hassle of read receipts, I ignored them and headed to the airport with my family of 5. He probably noticed the photo of the 2 I sent before sleeping. On the plane, I switched to airplane mode and saw messages like, "What's this? You're not misunderstanding something because of a photo, right? We just happened to talk when we met in town the other day. Let me explain when I get back." Clearly panicking because I hadn't replied, his messages seemed desperate. Today, we plan to enjoy the local tourist spots until it's time to check into the inn. The excitement of going on a trip with the entire family for the first time since becoming adults was palpable. It's the first time we're traveling as a family since we've grown up. Disappointed in my brother-in-law, but I guess I'm a bit thankful. Yeah, seriously. Don't lose tomorrow, sis. After checking into the inn and taking a bath, I turned off airplane mode, and immediately my husband called. Winter evenings come quickly, it was already dark. Maybe he's made it back home by now? Hello? Yvonne? Thank goodness. I got through. Where are you? The house is dark and everything's gone. Welcome back. Did you enjoy your trip with Mary? No, it's not like that. Let me explain. I went to your parents' house and nobody was there. I was worried. It seems my husband had even gone to my parents' house. I'm glad we all went on this trip. Did you see the room? It's all cleaned up. You should leave soon too. I've already contacted them about the cancellation. You're kidding. What am I supposed to do now? It's New Year's Eve. And I haven't saved up for moving expenses. I couldn't help but laugh at my husband's voice filled with despair. There's still the built-in lighting, so the lights will work, but there's no air conditioning. And since I disposed of the futon, spending New Year's Eve in that room will be tough. Don't worry. Mary is probably being kicked out of her house right about now too, so you two can spend New Year's together. Don't be so down. I've booked a flight for tomorrow, so you can spend New Year's at your parents' house. What? He was clearly shocked by the unexpected news. It made me feel almost like the mastermind behind a prank. Make sure you fill out the divorce papers I left in the room and bring them with you. We'll talk about the rest at your parents' house. I'll be waiting. Have a good year. Wait, my parents' house. I cut off the call after saying my piece and sent him the airline booking site and reservation number. Shortly after, a sobbing Mary called me. Hey! Why did you tell my husband? I can't get into my house. It's New Year's Eve. There's no way any hotels are available. The price of an affair is high, isn't it? Seems like a fitting punishment. Alex seems to be free too, so why don't you spend it together? No. Yvonne, I'm sorry. Please, talk to your mom for me. I can't even get into my own house. Mary's voice was filled with the same kind of despair as my husband's, which was amusing. Tom had already changed the locks and had gone back to his parents the day before. I decided to ask Mary something I had been curious about. So, did the one that got away seem bigger? Or did you just want to laugh at me behind my back? What? No. It was just a fling. He was originally my boyfriend, so if anyone snatched him, it was you. I never intended to wreck a home. Mary's self-centered and incomprehensible response infuriated me. Don't mess with me. You wreck someone's home and think you can get away with it? I'll be demanding compensation, so make sure you're ready to pay up. You're lying. Yvonne. We were. Just so you know, we're not friends or anything anymore. Mary seemed to start shouting something, but I had said what I wanted to. I decided to leave the rest to a lawyer and blocked her number. I wondered how the two of them would spend their New Year's Eve. But soon got lost in a lavish meal and delicious drinks, forgetting all about them. We all thoroughly enjoyed spending the end of the year and the start of the new one at a traditional inn for the first time in our lives. January 1st, New Year's Day. The final showdown. I went to the open-air bath from the morning and prayed to the already risen sun. According to a line message from my husband, he and Mary spent New Year's Eve hopping from one open bar to another and killed time at a fast food restaurant in the early hours. The only thought that came to my mind was, serves you right. We decided to visit a famous local shrine for the first shrine visit of the new year, then head to my husband's parents' house. My brother and sister planned to go shopping for souvenirs at the mall. Big sis, make sure you get your revenge. If you win, we'll celebrate your victory. I showed them my fist in solidarity. Upon arriving at my in-laws' house, we were greeted by several relatives who had come to visit. Happy New Year! Sorry for barging in with so many people so early in the year. Not at all. Happy New Year to you too. Please, come in. Although my in-laws were curious about the situation, we couldn't proceed without the main character. We chatted over tea prepared by my mother-in-law until the relatives left. And that's when my husband arrived.
What? Dad, what's going on?
Seeing our parents seated in the living room, my husband was amusingly taken aback. Welcome back. Did you bring the divorce papers? Both my husband and my in-laws looked at me in shock. To move the conversation along smoothly, I laid out the evidence of the affair and the hot photos of him and Mary on the table. Then, I bowed to my in-laws. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry, but we are getting a divorce. The shock of being declared divorced by the parents seemed to hit hard. So, I decided to give him a chance to explain kindly. This man left me to do the New Year cleaning while he went on an affair trip abroad with my best friend. Was it fun?
It's not like that. Mary is an ex-girlfriend. I was just nostalgic. It was all just for fun.
Best friend. My mother-in-law covered her mouth with both hands. My parents' cold stares pierced my husband. So, it was all just for fun. There's a small child involved, you know? You wanted to play even if it meant destroying both of your families? Even if it meant dipping into our savings? Did he think I hadn't noticed the misuse of money? Or had he forgotten that Mary had a child? My husband fell silent, words failing him, and my emotions exploded.
You left all the housework and finances to me, even touched the joint savings. Did you think I would forgive anything? I'm not your convenient duck, nor your maid, nor your slave. Idiot.
All the frustrations I had been bottling up came out in a scream. My husband quickly assumed a prostrate position.
I'm sorry. I took advantage of Yvonne being older and kind. I'll make it right from now on, and I'll pay back the money I used, so.
A dull thud reached my excited ears.
What the hell are you doing? You idiot.
My father-in-law, who had been silent until then, stood up and started hitting my husband. My husband's pale cheek quickly reddened. After being hit 2 or 3 times by my father-in-law, my husband lay on the floor, groaning. My father and mother-in-law had to pull away the still furious father-in-law and make him sit down. To my husband, who was crying with a nosebleed, I said,
look carefully at how much you've hurt those around you for your own desires.
My father-in-law and father were shaking with rage. And my mother-in-law, mother, and I were in tears. Seeing this, my husband began to sob uncontrollably. Please write and send the divorce papers. I'll be filing for compensation. Don't worry about returning the joint savings money. I used the other half for this family trip. So, there will be no division of property, I said, standing up and lowered my gaze to my in-laws. My mother-in-law hugged me and promised, we'll make sure he pays the compensation. My husband, still crying, looked up at me.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I never wanted things to end up like this. I don't want to divorce you, Yvonne. I don't want that.
My father took me by the shoulder and we headed for the door. I felt like my long battle that started at the end of the year was finally over. Later, through a lawyer introduced by my father, we divorced. I demanded $60,000 in compensation from my husband and $40,000 from Mary. Since I had informed my company's supervisor about the divorce at the end of the year, rumors started circulating around the office right after the holiday break. Unable to bear being looked at with disdain, my husband left the company as if fleeing, 2 months later. Mentally exhausted, the last time I saw him, his once silky soft hair seemed to have thinned a bit. Right after the divorce, my husband sent me creepy messages like "I want to be hugged and sleep by Yvonne" and "I can't forget the breakfast scenes with just the two of us," so I immediately blocked him. It turned out, Mary was discovered to have been using household money for her affair with my husband, leading to her divorce. Likely because she dipped into the savings meant for Anna, she angered Tom to no end. Unable to gain custody of Anna and not allowed to return to her parents' house, Mary was left with nowhere to go. Tom also made sure to demand compensation from both Mary and my husband. After the divorce, Mary reportedly begged Tom for reconciliation numerous times, but to no avail. The two of them, having lost their homes, somehow ended up getting back together and living with each other. After all, they were two of a kind.
Tom used to do the laundry. If I hadn't met you, I would have been happy. My life with Yvonne was happy every day. If only you hadn't seduced me.
Both wanting everything done for them and being naturally dependent, their mutual dissatisfaction exploded. However, since both are in debt and can't leave, they seem to be living together, constantly fighting. I've gotten used to my new apartment life and am spending my days feeling refreshed. Winning the battle against my husband at the start of the year seems to have positively impacted my work as well. Since then, my family's relationship has improved even more, often saying, "Let's go on a trip somewhere again."
Next year, I'm thinking about planning to spend the end-of-year holidays abroad.
Having a family member who finished only high school is a disgrace to the whole family. Engagement's off. Just as he said that, my father-in-law reached for a beer bottle nearby. And, unbelievably, he started pouring beer over my mother's head, who twisted her face in shame. I was lost for words at this shocking sight. But my mother-in-law, unconcerned, turned a mocking gaze towards me and said, "It's because there's something wrong with your mother, isn't it? Despite being a nurse, you couldn't find someone to marry you by the age of 40, right?" "Right, Rachel?" It wasn't me who snapped at that moment, it was my mother. "Then I'll cancel the $200 million account." Of course, my in-laws must have thought she was joking. After all, they had insulted us so much, there's no way we could have a $400 million fortune. That's what they had assumed. But the next moment, my father-in-law froze. "Rachel, can you call Tim?" He couldn't understand why Tim's name came up at that moment. My mother's words were not a bluff. It was the truth. When they realized that, my in-laws ended up begging for our forgiveness. My name is Rachel. I'm currently 40 years old, single, and working at a hospital. I belong to a department dominated by women, where there's little chance for romance. However, concerned about this, a colleague from work introduced me to someone. That someone later became my husband, John Ortega. John works for a company that handles system-related work for our hospital. He's said to be 35 years old. I had heard rumors of him being a refreshing, handsome man. Such a person would normally be married or at least have a girlfriend. Yet, John had been single for several years. My hobbies are touring on big bikes, fishing, and I also like camping. I often go alone. In other words, he was a prime catch not often found on the marriage market. But spending time with John revealed his playful side and his kindness in always putting others first, and before I knew it, I was drawn to him. When I proposed we start dating, he happily agreed, and after about 6 months, we were in a serious relationship with marriage in mind. Everything with John was going incredibly smoothly. We were both of a certain age and even talked about moving in together. "Rachel, what do you think?" "I'm okay with us moving in together."
I think so too. Plus, if we want kids, considering my age, it's better to decide sooner rather than later.
Fortunately, our lifestyles and values aligned perfectly, so we quickly rented an apartment and started living together. A month after we began cohabitating. I was relaxing at home after a night shift. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting any deliveries today, and we hadn't told anyone about our new place. Who could it be? Wondering, I went to answer the door, and there stood a woman I didn't know. She covered her mouth with a fan and wore a hat and sunglasses, making it impossible to see her expression. Facing this suspicious person, I swallowed hard. I'm Kelly, John's mother. I heard my son started living with someone, so I came by. It's awkward to talk here, may I come in? Initially frozen with confusion, I eventually understood the situation. It seemed that John's mother had come to see if I was suitable for her son, now that he had finally started a serious relationship and moved in with someone. My son has always been poor at judging character. If you're going to be my daughter-in-law, you need to be perfect, she said. Okay. Although her directness made me uncomfortable, I let her into the room. The last thing I wanted was to cause any issues that could strain my relationship with John. So, I just smiled and made sure not to argue with my mother-in-law. Without even a "may I come in," she barged into the room, ran her index finger across the top of the cabinet by the entrance, and, frowning, said, "Oh, there's dust here. If you don't clean every day, the whole house will end up a dusty mess, you know?" The dust wasn't as bad as my mother-in-law made it out to be. It was just the normal amount that accumulates from living. So, I was about to make an excuse on the spot, but she didn't even let me get that far and started saying, "Clean up now, and then serve some tea immediately." Normally, you'd offer it without being asked, right? Troubled as I was, I vacuumed and ventilated the room, then tidied up and called out to my mother-in-law. Then, with a huff, she said, "This is less than 30 points. As a wife, that's a failing grade," and blandly reported her grading. Reluctantly, I apologized and served her the tea as she demanded, only to be told, "This cheap stuff tastes awful, and when I served some snacks, these are the worst knockoffs of luxury goods." Fuming with anger at my mother-in-law, who came unannounced only to say dreadful things, I told myself to endure it and kept quiet. After staying for about an hour and a half, it was unclear if she was satisfied, but she said, "Well, I'll let it go at this for now. But if you're serious about marrying my son, you better work harder. Frankly, you look quite old, and I was against it. But for now, just make sure not to act above your station," and left with that snide remark. Exhausted from my mother-in-law's surprise visit, I ended up falling asleep on the sofa without doing any housework or preparing dinner. Then, I was awakened by John returning from work. "Oh, sorry. I didn't manage to do anything around the house." As I hurriedly tried to get up and start on the chores, John gently spoke to me. "Don't be mad, just calm down. What happened?" It's rare for Rachel to be sleeping like a log on the sofa. Though he asked as if he didn't know, I couldn't bring myself to say that his mother had come today, giving me looks as if she was assessing me. For the moment, I just told him about his mother's visit. His face immediately tensed up. And after a heavy sigh, he apologized. "Sorry, my mom must have said something rude, right? I'm really sorry." I hadn't even told him what happened today. Yet, he apologized as if he knew something. "Has something like this happened before?" Looking guiltily down, John shared. "My mom's a bit eccentric. She cares a lot about status." It seems my mother-in-law has a history of being harsh to John's previous girlfriends, ultimately causing them to break up. Maybe her sudden visit was an attempt to break us up as well. I had thought John was just not on the marriage market due to his unique hobbies, but it seems there was more to it. "I knew I had to tell you someday. I just didn't want to be disliked by you, Rachel. I'm sorry." John apologized again. It appears that his mother had interfered in the same way with his past girlfriends, ultimately leading to breakups. He had kept our relationship a secret for that reason. But his mother was relentless. So, she found out. We concluded she must have followed us after seeing us together somewhere. I was taken aback when I heard it, but given what I witnessed from his mother today, it wasn't out of the question. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't anxious. But I love John. When I told him so, John smiled, relieved. However, that relief was short-lived. Soon after, his mother targeted me again, choosing a day right after my night shift. "Well, look at this mess. If you're going to work irregular hours as a nurse, why not hire a helper?" "Oh, but I guess nurses don't have the money for that." My apologies. This is exactly the problem. "Don't rely on John's earnings, learn to earn your own way," she scoffed. Apparently, she had seen me leaving the hospital and assumed I was a nurse due to my hours. Knowing arguing with her was futile, I kept silent. My mother-in-law, mistaking my silence for admission, ramped up the harassment. As a nurse, well, I might begrudgingly accept the marriage, but in return, you'll have to fulfill your duties as a wife properly. Understand? Marrying into the firstborn's family isn't something to be taken lightly. "If there's anything amiss, I'll be sure to give you a strict lesson," she said. It was probably all about producing an heir or doing all the housework as expected of a wife. Though not said directly, I was sure that was what she meant. So, I posed a question.
"By the way, how did you know which days I work nights?"
With a smug look, she snorted and answered. "Our daughter-in-law from your hospital is a nurse. I had her check your schedule by dropping your name, blatantly overstepping boundaries." While wondering why she would go to such lengths to monitor me yet miss the essential parts, I ended the conversation with, "All right." And then, after a year and a half of dating and overcoming various challenges, as our jobs started to stabilize, we finally decided to get married. Despite everything my mother did, you're the first person who's stayed by my side. I've made up my mind. "I will make you happy, so please marry me," John said, and we got engaged. Since I come from a single-parent family, we planned to quickly greet my mother before heading to John's parents. However, just before, his mother suggested, "Why don't we all go out for a meal at a fancy restaurant, and bring your parents along too?" I sensed there was a catch. Despite my suspicions, I reminded myself this would be the last ordeal and arranged a meeting for the marriage introduction. On the day, we were led to a private room in a fancy restaurant I'd never entered before, where both families met for the first time. My mother-in-law was dressed in an expensive-looking dress, and my father-in-law was sharply dressed in an expensive suit. As soon as we sat down, he introduced himself with a self-satisfied look, handing out his business card as if it was something to brag about. Apparently, he was a big-shot bank president, and my mother, wide-eyed, murmured in awe, "That's impressive." Then, without anyone asking, my mother-in-law started boasting. "I graduated top of my class from a prestigious university and have been supporting the household since marrying my husband. I've raised our sons to be fine men, and I consider myself the epitome of a wife." She then implied that my mother should state her educational background, but John tried to change the subject too late. "And why do we not see Rachel's father here? I'm a single mother who raised her daughter alone." "So, there's no father present?" My mother answered with a slightly troubled look. Immediately, my in-laws began to smirk condescendingly. My mother-in-law mockingly laughed, "Then, you must have a low education level, right? A woman abandoned by her partner is less likely than a high school graduate." "And what about your education?" My father-in-law added insult to injury, trying to embarrass my mother further. Despite John and my attempts to intervene, they were relentless. Finally, my mother, her face twisted in shame, honestly answered, "I'm embarrassed to say, but I dropped out of college." My mother-in-law, like at our first meeting, snapped her fan closed and snorted, "Oh my, a college dropout. A family with a college dropout is a disgrace to the entire clan. The engagement is off." My father-in-law went as far as to say, causing me to tremble with anger. Then, my mother suddenly raised her head and protested to my in-laws. "My educational background has nothing to do with my daughter's marriage." But my mother-in-law turned to me, blatantly disparaging me. "It's because there's something wrong with your mother, isn't it? Despite being a nurse, you couldn't find someone to marry you by the age of 40, right?" "Right, Rachel?" The next moment, unbelievably, my father-in-law poured beer over my mother's head. "We are talking right now. You haven't been given permission to speak, have you?" My mother was left speechless in shock.
Seeing this, John stood up, unable to bear it any longer, but it was not him but my mother who stopped him with a hand gesture. "Then I'll be canceling the $400 million account," my usually calm and never yelling mother said, her voice shaking with anger. Seeing their reaction, my in-laws chuckled, what a joke. And what a ridiculous way to argue, but they were about to be shocked by a startling truth. A passing employee hurriedly brought something to clean up, and after my mother briefly left the table, she returned with a smile and said to me, "Rachel, could you call Tim, please?" At that moment, the smile vanished from my father-in-law's face who had been mocking us earlier. Trembling, he barely managed to say, "Tim. Why bring up Tim's name?" Neither my mother nor I answered him. Following my mother's request, I was about to stand up and call Tim when my mother-in-law, sensing something, tried to stop me. "Wait, just a minute. We're still talking here." But for me, enough was enough. My mother had given up her dreams to have me at a young age and raised me all by herself, enduring disparagement. I could tolerate a lot when it came to myself, but not when it came to my mother. "Who is Tim?" John looked puzzled, not keeping up with the conversation. So, I explained that Tim was the branch manager of the bank where my mother had an account. "My mother has an account worth $400 million, including cash deposits and various financial instruments like stocks. Given the amount, Tim, the branch manager, naturally handles her account," I said. This news caused even more disturbance among my in-laws, particularly my father-in-law, who was stunned to learn that my mother had such a significant sum in a branch of the bank he presided over. He had thought it was all a bluff, but the mention of the branch manager's name and my move to actually call him made it seem all too real. Trying to salvage the situation, my father-in-law, maintaining a facade of composure, made a ridiculous suggestion. "Well, let's hear you out. And pouring beer over your head was just a way to let commoners enjoy a good beer with all their senses. So, it was not meant as an insult. Don't get it wrong, okay?" His condescending tone only reignited my anger. It was clear his pride was still in the way. Thinking that these people wouldn't understand unless I spoke up firmly, I directed a cold gaze at them and bluntly said, "There's no reason for us to listen to someone who behaves like that. Pouring beer over someone's head is not something a decent person does. We'll be speaking to the branch manager about the insult and the cleaning bill for my mother's clothes, and we'll proceed with closing the account," I retorted, colder than ever. My father-in-law, taken aback by my boldness, blustered, "If this turns out to be a joke, I'll sue all of you." Then, my mother sighed softly and placed a business card in front of my father-in-law, who went from red-faced anger to ashen in an instant. When my mother-in-law nervously asked what company it was, my father-in-law whispered, "It's one of our biggest corporate clients." "No way. Why is the CEO of that company you?" My mother-in-law's face turned pale as she turned back to us. My mother, who had been grimacing in humiliation just moments before, now introduced herself with a resolved expression. "Let me reintroduce myself. I'm Nora, Rachel's mother and the president and CEO of this company. I usually send my vice president or other employees for regular transactions, so it's fine if you don't remember me. Actually, the initial greetings to your company were made by the previous president. The transition to me happened afterward. Well, now I see how insignificant my position as president is to you." Suddenly, my father-in-law began to prostrate himself on the floor. Despite being a bank president himself, not recognizing the president of a major client company in front of him was more than just an embarrassing mistake. This incident slowly began to reveal that my father-in-law was nothing more than a figurehead. The story goes back to when my mother was pregnant with me in her sophomore year of college. Known for her intelligence and popularity, she attended one of the top schools, dreaming of becoming a designer. Normally, students from her school would secure bright futures. But my mother couldn't give up her dream and even confronted her parents, my grandparents, wanting to attend a design school instead. "I want to go to a design school for further studies. I've decided I want to pursue a career in design." Of course, my grandparents were opposed.
They refused to support her financially if she chose a design school over the college, leading to a lot of frustration for my mother. That's when she reconnected with my father, her middle school classmate. My father, a college dropout working on construction sites. And my mother hit it off, leading to my mother getting pregnant at 17. I was scolded severely, not just by my teachers and friends, but my parents were furious. They refused to pay the rest of my school fees, so I couldn't take a leave of absence and had to drop out. I had to give up my dream of becoming a designer. But I'm glad I got pregnant with Rachel. That's something I'm sure of. My mother recounted with sincerity in her eyes. However, my mother-in-law sneered and countered. Of course, getting pregnant as a student and then being forced to drop out is expected, isn't it? Why state the obvious as if it's something noble? It's nothing but a result of your own actions, and not a story worth praising. Plus, being abandoned by the very person who got you pregnant, how pathetic. And what does this have to do with the current situation? Are you trying to garner sympathy? Ha, don't make me laugh. Then my mother, narrowing her eyes, continued her story calmly. After being forced to drop out of school and disowned by her family, she lived with my father, the child's father. They were indeed married. My father had promised to take responsibility and married my mother, but he collapsed suddenly at work one day and never came home. My mother heard from the company presidents at the time how it was a great loss because my father was a very hard worker and sincere. With no diploma and no chance of pursuing her dream as a designer anymore. My mother had a duty to raise me properly. That required money, so she resolved to speak to the president at the time. Please let me work here. I'll carry heavy things, I'll get any qualifications needed. I don't need any special allowances or treatment, just please let me work here. And so, my mother became a rare female construction worker at the time. To my father-in-law, who looked puzzled, my mother said with a calm face. A small company that only had 10 employees at the time has grown this big. I still believe that's something to be proud of. My father-in-law, who hadn't caught on yet, finally seemed to realize what she meant. You can't mean you're the successor of that company, and after taking over as president, you've grown it to this size. My mother just smiled, which only made my father-in-law more anxious. He started fidgeting, clearly unsettled. It seemed my mother-in-law realized as well, and despite having demeaned my mother earlier, she now looked visibly shaken, her eyes darting around. Wait, if you put it that way, it sounds like that small company is now this big company we have a major contract with. Surely, a dropout couldn't possibly. But then, both of them looked back at my mother's business card again. My mother nodded smugly. My in-laws trembled, realizing the person they had looked down upon had climbed from the depths to become a true success story. You judged my mother based on her being a dropout or leaving college, right? But to her now, being a dropout or anything like that doesn't matter. She's achieved success on her own and raised me well. That's the reality, I said. My father-in-law, being a big bank president, must have understood the magnitude of my mother's achievements. It was time to press the point. Sure, getting pregnant and giving birth have many risks. But because of my mother's decision, I am here today, and she raised me to be the person I am. You can't twist this fact. With the results to show for it, why do you find joy in nitpicking the process? Is that the right thing to do? Unable to bear my cold gaze, my father-in-law averted his eyes, looking frustrated. My mother-in-law, still trying to find some way to retort, muttered. Okay, so your mother is amazing. But, you're just a nurse. Planning to live off your mother and husband's money, huh? How disappointing. You're just riding on your mother's coattails, how pathetic. Just because your mother is incredible doesn't make you special, you know? It seems that's just her nature. Shifting the target to me since she couldn't find fault with my mother anymore. Then John, finding it easier to speak up, finally said, Mom, you've been mistaken all along. Rachel isn't a nurse. She's a doctor. This revelation stunned my in-laws. Especially my mother-in-law, who had been concocting her own narratives, now reduced to silently mouthing words in shock. After a moment of silence, my father-in-law, with a strained voice, began to blame my mother-in-law.
You said Rachel was just a nurse, an insignificant person. But what now? She turns out to be a doctor. Did you deceive me? What's with that tone? All this time, I've been keeping unwanted bugs away from John, haven't I? And now, a small mistake and it's all my fault. You're the one always blaming others without doing anything yourself.
They began to argue among themselves, a clear sign of discord. Witnessing this unbearable scene, I let out a sigh and revealed the truth. I've always wondered. If the second son's wife was a nurse at the same hospital as me, knowing my shift schedule, she couldn't have been a stranger. My mother, sensing what this meant, smiled. John, knowing everything, stayed silent, waiting for me to continue. My in-laws swallowed hard, watching us intently. In the midst of this, the truth that shocked them was revealed. The second son's wife, who had been leaking my shifts to my mother-in-law, was a nurse from the same clinic. Feeling guilty, she apologized to me. My mother-in-law had mistaken me for a nurse, so she deliberately hid the fact that I was a doctor. Her name was Michelle Smith. You understand now, don't you? At those words, my father-in-law stood up abruptly. Smith. Wait, that's my wife's maiden name. He began to panic.
What? Divorced? When did this happen? I had no idea.
My mother-in-law exclaimed, clearly disturbed. But John, with a snort, revealed the truth. They're not divorced, nor is it the maiden name. You know why? Because he changed her family name. Unable to bear the fact, my in-laws' complexions worsened.
I've never heard of such a thing. What's going on?
My mother-in-law collapsed to her knees. My father-in-law, who had assumed his second son had brought a wife home, murmured to himself in shock, sinking down like my mother-in-law. As they struggled with the revelations, I decided it was time to deliver the final blow. John has something to say about our marriage as well. I hinted, causing my mother-in-law to cover her ears and shake her head in denial. My father-in-law, in a daze, turned to John, who placed a marriage certificate on the table and declared, I can't deal with any more of your farces. Depending on how you acted, I thought I could endure it, but pouring beer on someone, berating them, and taking pleasure in their misfortune is just shameful behavior for parents. Stung by their beloved son's harsh words, my in-laws looked on the verge of tears. My mother-in-law, finally grasping the situation, begged us to wait.
Please reconsider. Please, stop making things difficult for us.
My mother-in-law pleaded, her voice quivering. My father-in-law, desperate to appease us, added,
If only you had told us you were the president from the start, none of this nonsense would have happened. And to think, canceling a $400 million account over this, impossible, right? John, calm down. Don't do something unnecessary.
Their pleas felt like a last-ditch effort, leaving me speechless with disbelief. What are you even saying now? It's you two who orchestrated this situation. You've brought this upon yourselves.
Such a thing, John.
They protested, but my mother, having had enough, began calling her phone. Tim? It's been a while. Yes, I wanted to talk about the account. As my mother spoke, my father-in-law seemed to realize the gravity of the situation.
I'm so sorry. Please, not the cancellation.
However, my mother, looking on with a cold gaze, sharply retorted. If I weren't the president of one of your bank's major clients, but instead a single mother working night shifts or juggling part-time jobs, would you have apologized to us face to face? Unable to respond immediately, John quickly backed up my mother. Dealing with people who judge others solely based on appearances or titles is not something we're willing to tolerate. We're done with your family for good. So, please, don't bother me, Rachel, or my mother-in-law anymore. I decide my own life. Realizing they were losing their precious son and facing damage to the bank, my in-laws broke down in tears. You've lived looking down on others, and now it's come back to haunt you. Learn from this and become someone who can treat people with kindness. Though, it might be too late for that. The reason both your sons chose to leave the house is undoubtedly because of you. By the way, mother-in-law, who really is the fox borrowing the tiger's fierceness between you and me? Wink. This sarcasm hit my mother-in-law hard, causing her to shed tears of frustration. In the end, both could only offer shallow apologies. Despite everything, my mother isn't someone who acts out of spite. But questioning whether having him as the bank president was the right choice, she discussed the incident in front of the board members, prompting the dignitaries to call an emergency meeting. It turns out my father-in-law was just a placeholder until the next president was decided. He must have known this more than anyone. Eventually, he apologized for the beer incident, paid for the cleaning, and then resigned from his position as president. The underlying dissatisfaction with his leadership within the bank, coupled with the warning from a major client, my mother, forced him to step down. Unable to find re-employment at 58 and unwilling to accept ordinary work due to his previous elite status. He's been stuck in a negative loop. My mother-in-law, boasting about her university degree but without a career, is just another 58-year-old housewife. Starting part-time jobs only to quit days later saying, "How can I be expected to sort someone else's packages?" She's been blacklisted as a cautionary figure in the region. Having money but lacking trust and credibility, and then losing their sons to marriage. They've faced a lonely old age due to their selfish and disdainful behavior. Learning about my in-laws' fate, my mother chuckled, having money doesn't guarantee happiness. Rachel, from now on, live supporting each other with John. After getting married, I took a break from work to focus on raising our child. Now that our child is older and in daycare, I've happily returned to work, feeling fulfilled every day. The nurse who apologized to me has been forgiven, and we now share a good relationship of mutual trust between doctor and nurse in obstetrics and gynecology. Soon, I plan to return to my hometown to open my own gynecology clinic. Naturally, John's company will handle all the systems, and everything related to the clinic's design and construction will be entrusted to my mother's company. After giving up her dream once, my mother, through immense effort, expanded the company my father was part of and now runs a construction company capable of handling design work. "I'm designing my daughter's clinic," she boasts to the neighbors, her face shining brighter than ever before. My name is Julie North, and I'm 58 years old. Currently, I work as a neurologist at a university hospital in the United States. Right now, I'm taking a longer vacation to accompany my daughter, Mia, on her short-term study abroad. It's been years since I last visited. I stopped by the university hospital where I used to work, which holds many nostalgic yet painful memories for me. I had coffee at the hospital's cafe terrace, where I used to take breaks when I worked there. 18 years have passed, and while the view outside has changed slightly, the clear, blue sky remains the same, reminding me of those words suddenly uttered by my ex-husband. Choosing a child born from a young parent over one from an older parent due to the excellence of the younger generation. I was stunned by his sudden statement. "What do you mean?" "Huh? Just what I said. You're a doctor, you should understand the high risks of late pregnancy." "You're not talking about the risks to the mother or the birth itself, but..." "Yes. It's about the child's abilities." "What? What are you talking about now? You knew this from the beginning when we wanted children. That's why we went through fertility treatments." "Well, yes, that's true. I did want children. Then, the situation has changed." "I don't understand what you mean." I truly didn't understand. We were a couple of doctors, myself a neurologist and my ex-husband a plastic surgeon. My ex-husband opened a cosmetic clinic in New York and took a new step as a cosmetic surgeon, and at the same time, we started trying to have children. However, it wasn't easy, and after 2 years of hoping for a child, I finally got pregnant at 40 through fertility treatment. We cried tears of joy for the long-awaited pregnancy, and my ex-husband became overly protective until I reached a stable period. Seeing him like that, people from our workplaces, friends, and families joked, it's going to be even tougher when the baby arrives. Yet, a few months later, I found myself in a situation where I was confronted with those opening words. "You really didn't notice?" "Notice what?" "The things I've been doing outside. You knew, didn't you?" I couldn't have been unaware. But in a few months, our family was going to grow. I knew something had to change, so I gathered my courage and waited up many nights for my ex-husband to come home late so we could talk. That day, I was waiting for him again. "Welcome home. You're up?" "Yeah. I was thinking we should talk." Whether he knew of my feelings or not, I got a nonchalant okay in response. "Today, I got a notice about a class at the hospital. Tom, won't you go?" "Huh? Most husbands are participating. So I thought you might." "I'm not going." "What?" I said I'm not interested. "Not interested?" I'm a doctor, right? I've seen countless children as patients. I don't have any problems with kids, so why bother? But raising our own child from a newborn is completely different. I'm a doctor too, but I can hardly imagine what giving birth or raising a child is like. That's your feeling. I feel different. I'll be fine, so I'm not going. That's it. My ex-husband, clearly uninterested, exerted a silent pressure, but I pressed on. "A colleague mentioned they thought you were having an affair." "What?" "They said they saw you in the middle of the week, in downtown, walking arm in arm with a young girl, entering a department store, looking happy shopping together." "Really? So, what? Is that person stalking me?" "No. They just happened to see you because they had errands in the same department store." "But they snitched on you, right? Using the word affair without knowing if it's true. If it's not, that's defamation, you know?" "What? That's not the point." "It is. You're suspecting me based on some uncertain story. So, it's not true?" "Who knows?" "What?" "Look, my clinic promotes beauty, so naturally, we have a lot of young female staff. You know how scary women can get? To keep the peace, I have to treat everyone equally. As the owner, it's my duty to provide meals, shopping trips, and some relaxation time to acknowledge the hard work of running a popular clinic, right?" "So, you're doing the same with other staff members, not just the one my colleague saw?" "Well, you could say that." "So, you're neglecting our family for them?" "Without them, our clinic wouldn't survive. They're essentially supporting our income, which means they're supporting our household, right? To say I'm neglecting our family for that seems a bit off, doesn't it?" My ex-husband said this with a smirk, making the most appalling statements seem reasonable. What does he mean by relaxation time? Is sneaking into a hotel considered relaxation? A colleague mentioned seeing him enter a hotel with a woman. The hotel they mentioned was one he often used for business meals. The moment I heard it, I instantly knew it was true, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. I believe he started doing these things shortly after opening the clinic. Having money, my husband turned his attention outward all at once. Since then, he spent even less time at home, whether it was because he was hiding less or for some other reason. And then, back to that opening statement. One day, when he came home, he immediately called out for me to come to the bedroom. "Come out." Curious, I opened the door, only to find a very young, flashy woman sitting on the sofa with a smirk. "The person my colleague mentioned?" My ex-husband reacted to my quiet murmur. Quick on the uptake. "Yes, this girl will become my official wife. And she's already pregnant." "I see. And what about me?" "We're getting a divorce." "You think you can just decide that on a whim?" "It's not on a whim. I have to take responsibility for her." "What about your responsibility to me?" "Money, huh?" "What?" "If it's money you want, I'll give you plenty. There's the divorce settlement, after all. I could even give some to the child she's carrying. A child born from an outdated concept. I'll give enough to cover whatever little they might need." With that, he laid a completed divorce form on the table in front of me, implying I should sign it and disappear. The woman looked at me with a smirk, whispering, "Creepy." I couldn't stand being in the same space with these people anymore, and more importantly, after what had happened, I realized it was utterly impossible to consider a future with the man in front of me as my husband and part of a family. Things moved quickly from there. We agreed to involve lawyers in our discussions, and I ended up keeping the divorce papers. Not wanting my unborn child to be exposed to this environment for even a second longer, I quickly packed my essential belongings into a suitcase and left the house as soon as we had come to an agreement. And now, 18 years later, returning to this place, I never imagined I'd have a chance encounter here. As I was lost in thought, I noticed someone approaching my seat. The moment I turned to look, "Julie?" I heard a voice I never wanted to hear again. It was my ex-husband, whom I hadn't seen since that day. "It's been a while." I managed to utter a non-committal greeting, unable to just ignore him. He took a step closer, smiled faintly, and spoke again. "What? Crawled back here? What? You went overseas after that, right? Felt the limit and ran back to your alma mater for help?" His twisted smile mocked me, vividly revealing his true nature, reminding me of the last time I saw him, and I felt a heavy weight in my gut. "Just a regular trip home. My child had some things to do too, and we're here together today." "The child from back then? Who else?" "Huh. Together, you say? What business? Does the kid have something? A sickness? What?" I was speechless at his audacity. The words about choosing a superior child over one born from an older pregnancy, my ex-husband's words from that time, came flooding back, causing my chest to ache anew. As I struggled for words, I heard footsteps from behind. "Mom? Mia. And who might you be?" Mia must have seen a stranger seemingly berating me as I sat hunched over in my chair. With utmost caution towards my ex-husband, Mia checked on the man. When my ex-husband caught sight of Mia, he looked at me quizzically. I couldn't help but smirk at him as I said, "This is Mia North, my daughter and, biologically, your daughter as well." My words left my ex-husband with his eyes popping out in shock. It wasn't surprising. Even just by looks, Mia was tall and possessed a radiant beauty. Plus, if he's been around here, he might have heard the rumors about her. He carefully chose his words before asking again. "Mia North, as in the one doing a stint in the surgical research lab?" "Spot on. Mia North, who got a temporary placement in the surgical research lab for her study abroad." I couldn't help but laugh at my stunned ex-husband. The child he had discarded was now an outstanding medical student after 18 years. Moreover, he had assumed that a child from an older pregnancy would not be excellent, perhaps even born with disadvantages. He could never have imagined that such a child would become a beautiful medical student. Surprising, isn't it? To think that the woman you left because of her late pregnancy and your talk of superiority and inferiority has, well, you know? That's... And Mia, she skipped grades. She's in her second year of med school at 18, already graduated from college. What? I couldn't help but smile at his genuinely puzzled reaction. Oh? Not familiar with the education system? Shut up. I thought you would surely know. I apologized with a light-hearted sorry as he bit his lip in frustration. He was a man of pride. Even during our marriage, he couldn't hide his displeasure at the slightest word from me, and that attitude hasn't changed even as he approaches 60, making me sigh softly. This girl, she graduated high school at 15 and finished college at 17. Despite being raised by a single parent, she really did her best. She's not just beautiful on the outside, but she's also an incredible person inside. That was truly how I felt. Mia was my pride and joy. Yet, the man in front of me couldn't resist throwing a bitter and unwarranted accusation. I bet you used your influence as a doctor to get her in there. What? You're a professor or something over there, right? With that kind of power, you could make anything happen, whether it's high school, college, or med school. Don't underestimate me. What? I said, don't lump me in with you. What? That's you, isn't it? Shoehorned into the bottom tier of some fancy high school, and barely making it into a college, let alone a medical or dental school. Your parents had to throw money around just to get you into a low-ranking private medical school in the countryside. How do you know that? Over there, I met someone who went to middle and high school with you. I heard all about it. Caught off guard by this boomerang, My ex-husband seemed to be frantically searching for who could have spilled the beans, asking like a child. I ignored him, finding his desperation annoying, and took a sip of my coffee. The familiar taste brought a moment of calm to my frayed nerves. One of the hospitals affiliated with the university wanted me to start working at the university hospital right away, but I was pregnant, remember? So, they suggested I teach some university classes while working part-time at the clinic. It just so happened they knew about me. Of course, I didn't know this person at all, and when I asked why they knew me, it turned out they had researched my background upon hearing a neurologist was coming over, and that's how they learned about my marriage and spouse. I heard a lot, you know? Like how you bullied others just because you were a bit wealthy, or how you threw money around to play with girls. My husband's family owned land in the countryside, making them quite wealthy locally with power and money to spare. And as an only child, he was spoiled rotten, fitting the stereotype of a bully perfectly.
Who told you that? Get lost.
It doesn't matter who. You're famous for it, aren't you? Among your classmates and friends. So anyone could have told me the same story, right? I continued speaking, silencing him as if to stop any further objections. That person told me you were used.
What?
At first, I was like, what? Wondering what they were talking about. But after hearing them out, it made sense. You, coming from the countryside, and me, having lived in New York all my life. We met at a new workplace, and I knew nothing about you. My ignorance of your past was convenient for you, wasn't it? Yeah, so what? Once it's out, it's out. Right, we were both new at the workplace, and I had just come from the countryside with no one I knew. And you, just as new, didn't know anything about my lousy past or who I really am. I thought you were convenient for me. So what? Faced with his defiance, I pressed on. It's not just that, is it? What? You wanted an excellent child. A child to overshadow your own complexes, to erase the inferiority you felt. That's why you wanted me. No, you wanted my status and genes, didn't you? You wanted the superior status and genes I had, the complete opposite of yours, right?
Don't be absurd. Don't say stupid things in front of the child.
What? In front of the child?
This isn't something you should let her hear.
Trying to protect his pride after all this time. The shallowness of this man makes me sick to my stomach. Don't worry. Mia knows everything.
What?
She knows you wanted a superior child and abandoned Mia and me. She knows everything about your past and present.
What? You told her everything?
I simply stated the facts. Before she was even born, you were gone. It's not like she wouldn't realize something was up. Besides, you can't fool a smart kid like Mia. My ex-husband's loud exclamation echoed in the quiet cafe terrace. Then, having been silent until now, Mia began to speak. Isn't that pathetic?
What?
I asked if you think that's not pathetic.
What? Why should I be lectured by a kid like you?
Because even someone you consider a child can see how pathetic your way of living is. He probably never expected to be told off by a child. My ex-husband was grinding his teeth in anger, his face turning red. Mia, looking at him with a detached gaze, continued. Just like Mom said, I know everything. Not just about the past, but also what's happening right now.
What?
I never imagined you would go crying to the professor I'm going to work with. Your clinic went under, didn't it?
What?
The decline in clients due to numerous failed plastic surgeries, fraudulent accounting, and investment failures. Well, it all started 18 years ago, didn't it?
How can you say that?
It all started when you left Mom and chose a new partner. Oh, wrong. It started when you got blinded by easy money at the clinic and got dazzled by women who were after your money. Their presence turned you into a money-hungry monster, leading to the loss of everything. Being called out by an 18-year-old, my ex-husband's face turned from red to a deeper shade of crimson, and finally, his lips began to tremble. Really, your pride is something else. Why don't you admit it? I'm a jerk. I'm the kind of jerk who ruins people's lives. That's why it's all coming back to haunt you now, you get it? What? Ruin lives? Thanks to our separation, Julie became a professor in America, and you're attending med school at the tender age of 18. It's all thanks to me. What? Don't joke. What? That's just the outcome, not thanks to you. Sure, the divorce might have been a catalyst, but my acceptance into a university was the result of my mother's hard work, and my ability to attend med school at my age is due to my own efforts and because my mother always looked out for me. She's always been considerate and hardworking, which is why so many good things have come her way. Unlike someone who easily discards people and even ruins workplaces, ending up in such a pathetic situation despite clinging to their petty pride. This was the first time I had seen Mia like this. Though she might become passionate during discussions about differing opinions, I had never seen her raise her voice in anger. She had always taken in what she heard about her circumstances calmly, but surely she must have been upset at times. Yet, it was about her own situation, never imagining she saw and thought of me in such a way. But my ex-husband, unable to contain his emotions even in the face of Mia's logical argument, blurted out. What? You wouldn't even exist without me. It's all thanks to me, you got that. How can you say such things to your child? It's okay, Mom. I don't mind. I'm indeed grateful for being born, but, to be precise, my gratitude is more towards my grandparents who supported you all these years. What? He hadn't expected the conversation to turn towards his parents. He froze, as if hit by a sudden realization. After you left, my in-laws actually kept in touch and cared for Mia. Well, you wouldn't know since you cut ties with them after our divorce. What? You were in touch with my parents. You turned them against me, didn't you? To get them on your side. What? No. Your parents disowned you because you discarded a smart and beautiful wife like me for a younger, foolish woman after getting dazzled by youth and pretense. What? They were disappointed in a son who barely managed to graduate from a medical school he was shoehorned into with money, struggled through numerous private lessons to pass his medical exams, and then whined to his parents until they opened a cosmetic clinic for him. And when you started earning big from the cosmetic surgery boom, you resumed your old habits of playing around with women, hiring nurses and staff based on whether you liked them or not, creating your own harem. The final straw was impregnating a nurse 2 decades your junior and abandoning your family. And for those women, you even ruined the clinic your parents built for you. What more could your grandparents possibly do to help? Mia's rapid-fire recounting of his sordid past left my ex-husband stammering incoherently. Watching him struggle, Mia looked on with disdain, suddenly becoming calm or perhaps overwhelmed by the absurdity of the situation. My ex-husband made an unbelievable request. Then you help me. What? You heard in the lab, didn't you? After losing the clinic, I've been struggling to find work. I suppose it must be tough, having to beg at the former workplace of your ex-wife. Right? Everyone's cold. So, if you, a promising and highly respected daughter of Julie, said you wanted to help your father after an unfortunate separation, they'd surely lend a hand, moved by the story. Hearing such delusional talk, Mia and I exchanged looks and sighed. Pathetic. What? To beg a child you abandoned and haven't thought of until now. It's disgraceful, pathetic, and just wow. Shut up. What do you know about me? I don't understand, I don't want to understand, and I never plan to understand. A doctor who can't empathize with others and only thinks of himself, causing medical accidents? I don't want to understand someone like that. And crying to Mia? That's ridiculous. Don't you have a brilliant child of your own? You should ask them for help. My child! It's impossible! They barely made it into a mid-tier private women's college. Oh. More money? What? So, you solved it with money again? What? I paid, so there's no problem. My ex-husband, reminded of his past, heatedly retorted, his face turning red again. Originally, such matters shouldn't be resolved with money. Trying to solve people's futures with money is just wrong. I think there are things money can't solve. What? Do you know one of your medical accidents involving a relative of my professor? What? It was the child of Professor Yagaki's niece. They had surgery at your clinic and ended up with facial muscle abnormalities. Wait, that case I couldn't solve with money. Seems like you've been running from the issue by closing your clinic. But you know, medical professionals are connected somehow, somewhere. I even ended up connected to one of your associates in America. Imagine domestically. Whether my words were registering or not, my ex-husband began to sweat profusely, his face pale, his eyes unable to settle. It's okay. What? It's going to turn out just like you imagine. Huh? Are you too scared to even speak? You caused this, no need to be scared now. If it benefits you, you don't care about others' bodies, right? Just try to keep that dark spirit of yours even behind bars. Wait. I really am. Your time is probably coming soon. You've been too busy securing your job to notice you're being pursued. You're joking, right? This kind of malicious story isn't a joke. You don't need to look for work anymore. You won't be able to work anyway. It's a lie. If you think it's a lie, then keep thinking that until it happens. For now, enjoy your precious family time. Having said what I wanted to say, I touched Mia's arm, signaling it was time to leave. Mia, touching my hand with her other hand, gave me a gentle, small smile. After that, Mia returned home after completing her 2-month medical study abroad. It was awesome. The food is delicious, and the people are kind. The teachers and seniors are all so polite, and the discussions are fascinating. Seriously, I might consider moving overseas in the future. That's great, glad you went. I'll have to make sure to pass on my thanks to the professors. While saying this, Mia grimaced at the sweetness juice she was drinking for the first time in a while. By the way, he got caught, huh? Yes, he did. While Mia was abroad, my ex-husband had been arrested. It seems the news and talk shows were abuzz with the fact that his failed cosmetic clinic was involved in multiple medical accidents implicating medical professionals. Mia must have had more than her fill of hearing and seeing this news during her studies. But this unexpected byproduct of her trip was a part of being 18. Until now, she had been too mature, trying too hard. Certainly, utilizing one's abilities is crucial, but after over 30 years as a doctor, I keenly feel that medical practice must be accompanied by humanity. Medical acts are meant to help people's lives, and at the heart of it all are the people themselves. Mia will undoubtedly grow significantly as a person in the future. As a parent and a senior in the medical profession, I intend to silently support her from behind and, at times, walk alongside her. My secret support activity. It's going to be a lifelong endeavor. Once, Emily stole my fiancé, Yosef, from me, discarded him, and then vanished without paying the compensation she owed to her parents. Now, she stands before us, making snide remarks. Your husband is quite a bit older, isn't he? What does he do for a living? My husband is a doctor. Compared to him, your husband looks poor. He has quite the muscles though. Could it be that he works on a construction site? But before I could retort, my husband, Tom, stopped me. I do physical work. Speaking of doctors, does that mean he works at the Blue Island General Hospital? Yes. He's a surgeon. Oh. He's actually one of my subordinates, you know? What? The surgeon at Blue Island General Hospital, Ken, right? I believe his specialty is orthopedics. What, really? Yes, pleased to meet you. I'm the chief of surgery at the General Hospital, Tom. After encountering Emily and getting into the car to go home, I burst into tears, and Tom asked me. I've been thinking a bit. Tell me, Mary, how do you want to deal with her going forward? Deal with her? That's impossible, obviously. Just thinking about it makes me feel suffocated. There was a time when just thinking about Emily would give me panic attacks. Yeah, I understood that you really don't want to be anywhere near that woman. So, I have an idea.
An idea?
Yes. A way to ensure that a woman never appears before you again. My name is Mary. A 32-year-old homemaker. Currently, I live a peaceful and enjoyable life with my husband, Tom, who is 12 years older than me, and our 3-year-old son. Tom is incredibly busy with his work, something he takes great pride in. I find fulfillment in supporting him and our family. It's somewhat rare these days for someone to dedicate themselves to homemaking as I do. At least, that's what my parents have told me. We are truly a happy family now. But getting here wasn't without its hardships. You see, I once experienced a great betrayal by someone I thought was my best friend. Emily, who I met in college and shared the same major with, was my friend. No, my best friend. Coming to a metropolitan university, I was a bit intimidated, but Emily reached out to me. She was bright, flashy, and always on the move, and I was amazed yet followed her lead. For someone as plain and serious as I had been through high school, she opened up a whole new world for me. And our relationship continued even after we graduated. We both found jobs in companies within the city and would often meet up for meals whenever we had time. Eventually, I met Yosef, a young man working in sales at a manufacturer that did business with the trading company I worked for. As a clerk, I started getting invited out by him, and our relationship developed from there. Honestly, having had little experience with men before, I was over the moon. Things progressed quickly, and after a year of dating, we got engaged when I was 26. I must have been quite smitten at the time. You've been neglecting our friendship, haven't you? Emily would sometimes say, noticing the change. Well, it's not like I could split myself into two. It was only natural that I started spending more holidays with Yosef. Do you have something to hide from me? Not hiding anything, but Emily had never introduced someone she was dating to me either. So, I thought friendship and romantic relationships were separate. We were planning our wedding together, so naturally, my time was taken up by him. I can't say I didn't want to surprise Emily by not telling her. Or rather, I was embarrassed. Introducing him to Emily, who could easily talk and hang out with any guy, felt daunting. I was scared of how she would see him through her eyes. But as the wedding drew closer, I thought it would be okay. I have someone I want you to meet, I told Emily, introducing her to Yosef. Oh my! You're being secretive, Mary. Keeping things from your best friend? That's cold. Emily slapped my back with a full-faced smile. But that turned out to be a mistake. When the wedding reservation and preparations were almost settled, he suddenly came to my parents' house and said, I'm sorry, Mary. I can't marry you. When I asked why, he said, Emily is pregnant. I couldn't understand what he meant right away. After that, it was a mess. Whether Emily was really pregnant didn't matter anymore. He called off the wedding when it was just around the corner. I'm terribly sorry. Instead of me, who was in shock, my father, almost furious, started berating him. It would have been worse if my mother hadn't stopped him. The wedding was cancelled. While I was helpless, my parents, furious that he did this to our only daughter, demanded he pay the full cancellation fee. They also demanded compensation from Emily. He acknowledged his fault and paid what he owed, and apologized sincerely. My memory of that time isn't clear. I was in shock, seemingly escaping reality. So, learning later that Emily had skipped town without apologizing or paying compensation was another blow. It turns out she wasn't actually pregnant, according to a letter left behind. The lie and her disappearance hit me hard again. What was she thinking? Emily's parents were also furious. When this rumor spread among my college friends, I received another shock. I didn't say anything because you didn't notice, but Emily has been taking and discarding guys you liked, one after another. That was news to me. Why would she do that? I don't know. Even though Emily was popular in her own right, whenever someone showed interest in you, she'd make them date her instead. Maybe she was jealous when guys approached you instead of her? But we were best friends. Were you? I was stunned. Back then, it looked more like you were following Emily around. That's what everyone thought Emily intended.
Honestly, those words hit me hard. Not only that Emily thought that way, but that I hadn't noticed it at all, and my lack of judgment when it came to men. On top of that shock, the gaze of the woman who was stolen just before her wedding at work made me mentally exhausted. I eventually quit my job and spent some time recovering at my parents' house. After settling down, I started job hunting again at 28 and began dating activities on my parents' suggestion. Having lost confidence in my judgment, I felt more trustworthy of the matchmaker profiles sent by my relatives. Among them, I met Tom. He was too busy with work to even think about women, and by the time he realized it, he was this age. Given he was turning 40, his surroundings were worried and arranged a meeting for him. I decided to marry him because he honestly expressed that work is work, and I might neglect home sometimes. Considering my past failure, we only informed close family and senior work colleagues about the wedding. The following year, I was supposed to take maternity leave, but at that time, Tom was headhunted by a different workplace in another regional city, leading to our move. Though I felt bad for the workplace I hadn't been at for long, everyone sent us off kindly. And so, our new life as a family of 3 began in a new place.
Wow! Could it be, Mary?
One day, out of the blue, Emily appeared right in front of me. That day, we were shopping at the mall as a family of 3. Our main goal was the home improvement center. Since moving here, we've been gradually working on our new home's interior ourselves. DIY has always been a hobby of mine. Tom's new job came with a higher position and, thankfully, less irregular hours. Now, he occasionally helps with picking up heavy items. Well, at the moment, he's giving our son, Henry, a shoulder ride. But in that mall, what were the odds?
Emily?
Long time no see. Wow, you got married.
Yeah, but Emily, you're in this town.
Yeah, I moved here for my husband's job. So, this man is your current husband, huh? Emily looked us up and down. Then, in a snide tone to Tom, he's quite a bit older, isn't he? Tom simply replied, yes, well, I tend to get caught up in my work. Mary's friend, are you? Yes, I'm Emily. But speaking of work, what do you do?
Emily! Isn't that a bit forward?
Oh, Mary, are you still mad about it?
It's not about that.
My husband is a doctor. Compared to him, your husband looks poor. He's got quite the muscles though. Does he work on a construction site? She was clearly judging by appearances alone.
That kind of remark.
But before I could argue back, Tom intervened. Yes, I do physical work. By the way, does that mean your husband works at the Blue Island General Hospital?
Yes. He's a surgeon.
Oh. He's actually one of my subordinates, you know?
What?
The surgeon at Blue Island General Hospital, Ken, right?
What, really?
Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm the chief of surgery at the General Hospital, Tom.
Tom? The one who was headhunted here last year?
What a coincidence, Tom said with a gentle smile.
Yes.
Suddenly, Emily's attitude changed. Looking back, this kind of behavior was nothing new. I just hadn't noticed before.
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize because of your casual attire.
No problem, casual clothes are just that. I tightly gripped the hem of the work clothes Tom was wearing at the moment. What's wrong, Mary? Let's go home. Are you sure? She's an old friend, right?
Yeah. I have so much I want to talk about.
Let's just go. All right then. We'll catch up another time.
Yes.
Emily's cheerful voice irked me to no end. What's wrong? You look pale, and your pulse is racing. Back in the car, as Tom was strapping Henry into his child seat, he checked my temperature and pulse.
I don't ever want to see Emily again. I don't.
And then he gently patted my trembling shoulder. If you don't want to see her, that's fine, but could you tell me why later? I silently nodded. That night, after putting Henry to bed, I told Tom everything that had happened. I see. So, that woman was the one you were engaged to before our meeting, who cheated before the wedding. You knew? I knew there was something sad in your past.
I nodded silently, several times.
Yes! And it's not just that. Always.
Tears of frustration wouldn't stop. It's always the same. I only realize something's wrong after it happens. I've always hated Emily.
If that's the case, it's pretty bad. And it seems she has a nasty obsession with you.
With me?
Yeah. I mean, what's with luring away every guy who gets close to you, only to dump them? What does she think they are to you?
Well, yes, but...
Even your ex-fiancé, he's not married now, right? If he's married to our Ken, that is.
Indeed, that's right.
Still, Ken, and...
Tom seemed lost in thought.
What's wrong?
About Emily's husband?
I've been thinking. Hey, Mary, how do you want to deal with her from now on?
Deal with her? That's impossible, obviously. Just thinking about it makes me feel suffocated. There was a time when just thinking about Emily would give me panic attacks.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I get that you really don't want to be anywhere near that woman. So, I have an idea. An idea?
Yes.
A way to ensure that a woman never appears before you again.
And then, Tom smiled gently again. Oh, that's right, this man, though he seems gentle, knows when to take action. 2 weeks later in the evening. As I was preparing dinner waiting for Tom's return, Mom, Grandpa and Grandma. Suddenly, Henry pointed out the window. Right after that, the doorbell rang. Indeed, it was my parents. I rushed to welcome them in. They live several counties away. A few hours by car.
What's going on? Why are you here?
Yeah, Tom called us. Said he absolutely needed us to house sit.
House sit?
Didn't you know? I hurriedly messaged Tom. Immediately, I got a message back, your dad and mom have arrived, huh? Come here now. And bring your smartphone earbuds, along with a URL to a certain store.
I don't know what's going on, but I need to go out now. Unusual for Tom to do something like this. I was in the middle of making dinner.
No problem, we'll finish it up. Let's make it our dinner. Wondering what was happening, I started to get ready to leave.
By the way, Mary, we saw that girl's parents at the service area on the way here.
My mother suddenly shared.
That girl?
Yes, that girl.
Just remembering her is irritating, that. Emily? I don't even want to say her name. Yes, but I wonder what was going on.
I hadn't told my parents that Emily lived nearby. Given how down I was back then, my mom was incredibly worried. And the things she said about Emily's parents were harsh. Honestly, I never thought my mom could speak so harshly. Given that history, I thought it best not to mention Emily over the phone, to avoid stirring up trouble.
I'll be going then.
I got into the car and headed to the restaurant Tom had indicated. It was a cozy, nice-looking restaurant. According to the store's URL, the dinner seemed reasonably priced. Was Tom waiting here for me? As I got out of the car, noticing several parked vehicles as the evening deepened, I received another message.
Put on the earbuds and come inside.
Wondering what this was about, I entered. A waiter guided me to a two-person table. A man in black, wearing sunglasses, was sitting across an empty seat. Leaning forward with his elbows on the table, hands over his mouth, looking very solemn. He emitted an unapproachable aura.
My companion hasn't arrived yet.
As I started to tell the waiter bringing water and offering a menu, he put a finger to his lips and subtly pointed across the Erica palms to a seat directly opposite. There was Tom. There were several dishes on the table, probably an early dinner. Tom was sitting across from a woman. I nodded to the waiter and ordered something light enough not to be out of place on the table. Then my phone vibrated in my bag. Startled, I checked it and saw it was from Tom. I hurriedly connected the earbuds to my smartphone and put them in my ears. Then I heard,
Ken is a good doctor. A plastic surgeon.
But Dr. Tom is much more amazing, isn't he?
The voice of a woman with her back turned jumped into my ears. It was Emily. Startled, I switched to recording mode. Tom was deliberately letting me listen.
Since then, I've had Ken tell me a bit about you.
Is that so?
I was amazed. I mean, you've handled many difficult surgeries domestically, right? I heard he has thousands of surgical achievements over 10 years.
Well, it's my job.
That's incredible.
Emily's tone had changed completely from the other day. And you researched that thoroughly, huh?
Actually, I heard it from Ken. When I mentioned meeting you by chance the other day.
At that moment, the man in black loosened his crossed hands, slightly lifted his hips, and then sat back down. I noticed he too had earbuds in. It must have been a surprise to suddenly reunite with an old friend.
Yes, but meeting you was the highlight for me.
Shouldn't an old friend be more important? No, I felt bad for speaking so disparagingly about you before, and I was sorry. Emily continued in a tone as if she might bite her tongue. I didn't know. She never spoke like this when she was with me during our student days. So, this was how she acted around men. And Yosef too had seen this side of her. Which means...
Anyway, are you satisfied with your marriage to Mary?
I am satisfied, but why do you ask?
Isn't it boring being with Mary?
Why would you say that?
Because she was abandoned by her fiancé back then.
Mary is a great wife. Too good for someone like me.
But she's plain, isn't she?
What are you trying to say?
Actually, since we talked the other day, I've fallen for your calm demeanor and presence. I think I can do much more for you than Mary could.
The man in black's hands on the table began to tremble visibly. So, this man is indeed. Oh, for me? What do you mean by that?
Well, you must be invited to parties and such, right? Having a plain wife like Mary at such events might be embarrassing, right? Those occasions need someone a bit more, well, like me.
So you wouldn't be embarrassed?
Yes.
So you're suggesting you want to switch from Ken to me?
What? No, that sounds terrible when you put it that way.
Then what do you mean?
I'm a bit dense when it comes to these things. Making a woman say it outright? Didn't I tell you, it was love at first sight? Ken is a promising man. You should stick with him, not an old man like me. Age doesn't matter. Actually, I've been disappointed with him.
That was when it happened. The man in black started to stand up. I hurried over to him. The man in black, likely Ken. I silently looked at him and showed my smartphone, still connected to the earbuds. Ken looked startled and sat back down. I needed to hear something more decisive. Disappointed. What do you mean? Is it because he comes home late? If that's the case, it's his job. Unfortunately, patients and diseases don't wait. No, it's not that. Whether he comes home late or not, that's not the issue. Then what is it? His salary. Given his age and career, it's normal. Young professionals are like that.
But he's a doctor.
So?
Well, if your spouse is a doctor, you expect an income over $200,000, right?
I believe he makes around $140,000 as it is.
When we got married, his salary was even less, and I was disappointed, given my expectations, and he goes off to conferences and such without taking me along.
So, with me, you think it would be different?
I'm not after your money. That's why I keep saying it was love at first sight.
Meaning?
I want to be with you.
At that moment, Ken finally stood up. I tried to stop him, but it was too late. He stood behind Emily, across the Erica palms. I hurried after him. Then, Tom gave a slight smile again. Emily, is what you just said true? Behind an unsuspecting Emily. Ken spoke in a low voice. What? What are you two doing? Cheating?
See, when you have something to hide, you end up saying such things.
Tom said calmly to Emily.
I heard what you said. So, you've always thought of me like that? What do you mean, like that? Isn't this what you mean? I presented the recording of the conversation to Emily.
What's this?
Tom took out 2 smartphones from his bag. One was connected to me, and the other must have been connected to Ken.
Do you even know what age a doctor becomes fully qualified? What are you talking about all of a sudden? We spend years in medical school, then another years as residents before becoming full-fledged doctors. I had just become a full-fledged doctor when we met. What?
Emily began to count on her fingers.
Basically, I was just a newbie. But you said you were a doctor at the mixer. I was a doctor, wasn't I? And at that time, I was dragged there by a high school friend. I thought it was too early for marriage. Yet, you came at me aggressively. Even so, I was earning more than my peers. You assumed I made more than that on your own.
Indeed, that's true. Doctors do earn well, but not until they are fully qualified. And whether they own a practice, where they work, their employment status, and their age can all affect their income. And it's true that their chances for marriage are less frequent.
It was a rare outing because I was busy starting out. I initially refused because I was still finding my footing. But that's true, but it might sound like an excuse, but I wanted to work in rural healthcare and needed to gain experience in the field to be as versatile as possible. But you would hysterically scream whenever I mentioned it. But I didn't want to go to a rural area. Even when I said it pays better, you refused. And it's not just that. You said you'd be a housewife to support me, yet you barely do any housework. What?
I was surprised at that.
But housework isn't just for women these days.
That's if both are working. I chimed in.
In this day and age, if you decide to be a stay-at-home wife, you really need to do the housework perfectly and make sure your husband doesn't have to worry about anything. Mary! Even you say that. But, can you do all that? And what about socializing? You seem to be confused about something.
Tom sighed deeply. You have a clearly mistaken image of a doctor's wife. Exactly. That's more like the image of a show-era housewife.
The glamorous life you imagine doesn't exist. I'm always watching the clock for his uncertain return time, taking care of our child, and making sure he has the nutrition he needs to sustain the energy for those 10-hour surgeries.
Oh, I see.
Ken, there were times I thought you lacked attention, but maybe you're not getting enough sleep at home?
Yes.
Well, I used to cook and do housework on my own, so it's okay. But it cuts into my sleep, and when I'm awake, he's all over me, making it hard to find time to study. Study? Of course. It's natural to keep updating my knowledge for the patients.
So, Mary.
You study too? Now of all times.
Of course.
If I can't respond to his sudden calls, it would be troubling. If it were 2 doctors married, maybe housework and secretarial tasks could be outsourced. But I'm just an ordinary person, so doing what I can to support Tom is my job. For him, the hospital, the patients, and to show our son a good work ethic. How pretentious! Say whatever you want. I'm not who I used to be anymore.
That's right. Seeing Emily trying to seduce Tom directly ignited a different kind of anger in me, unlike the fear I had felt before. Unable to retort because of the frustration at being contradicted by me, Emily stood silent. Then, Ken started speaking as if to seal the deal.
Emily, I've decided to break up with you. We're getting a divorce. What? What are you talking about? Being with you, I can't become the doctor I want to be. And let me ask again, do you have any intention of following me to a rural area? No way! I don't want to go to such places.
I see.
But I want to go. That's why I'm done being dragged around by you.
Emily's expression froze in shock.
You're going to leave me, you are.
Then, suddenly, Emily turned to me.
That's right, Mary. It was wrong of me to reunite with you. Why did you have to come here? If only we hadn't met. If we hadn't met, you wouldn't have thought about taking my husband? You haven't changed at all since college. What? How dare you?
Watching her, I gradually realized that Emily's existence evoked more pity than fear in me. Why have you always taken and discarded my boyfriends or those who could have been? Because I hated you, the plain and good girl. So, you put so much effort into someone you hate just because of that? You ended up running away from home because of what happened with Yosef. That's right. Her actions were indeed strange. I don't know what she disliked about me, but if she hated me, ignoring or bullying me would have been simpler. Instead, she took and discarded men in a way that other friends could see. And then ended up demanding compensation after taking my fiancé. Hey, Emily, does that mean you actually really liked me? What? Her eyes widened as if saying, what are you talking about? I wondered if the visibly bulging veins in her slender neck were just my imagination. It's said that veins bulge in the temples when angry. Other than with Yosef, I hardly noticed. And the men who switched to you because of your schemes were only proving their worth. In the end, it worked out in my favor, didn't it? No, that's not true. It can't be. Even if I had married Yosef, he might have cheated anyway. So, Emily, were you actually blocking my unhappiness? What? Her gaze wandered aimlessly. Haven't you realized? That can't be. But I'm sorry. I'll forget about you from now on. No. That can't be true. As she said this, Emily clutched her chest and suddenly collapsed in front of us. Doctor! Ken looked seriously at Tom. Call an ambulance, quick! Right away! After explaining the situation to the ambulance, Tom and Ken also left with it. Tom specializes in cardiac surgery. He probably won't be coming home tonight. As I sighed deeply, the waiter brought the order. Thank you. I'm sorry for the commotion. No worries, Dr. Tom had reserved this time for a private event. How thoughtful. He really takes action when it's needed. I thought with a smile. Later, at the hospital, there was another commotion. Tom's plan included Emily's parents coming in after this. Emily had only informed them of her marriage but had never introduced Ken to them. Perhaps the timing had prevented interstate travel. But that time had passed. Tom, through Ken, had contacted Emily's parents for two reasons. Potential trouble with men and Emily's health issues Tom had noticed from the start. Tom seems to have had doubts about the way the veins in the right side of her neck bulged from the first time they met. Indeed, Emily was found to have a cardiac condition. Early intervention saved her life, but she required some hospitalization. Her parents, upon arriving, decided to take her home. Emily was shaken by the divorce, the sudden discovery of her illness, and being called out by me. She seemed quite shaken by those three things. No, I don't want to go back home. Emily resisted her parents, but they insisted, you need to repay us for the compensation we fronted on your behalf. But her father's stern anger about the compensation she owed left her powerless. The divorce led to mediation, where misuse of Ken's savings was brought up, increasing the amount owed by her parents. Dragged back home, Emily was now under her parents' watchful eyes, unable to escape. Working off her debt. For someone as carefree as Emily, this must be unbearable. Oh, there's a message from Ken. Today is the weekend. Tom has taken a half day off from work, so for the first time in a while, we've come to a park with a large grassy area as a family of 3. Despite the continuing cold days, Henry, dressed warmly, is running around on the grass, laughing. Looking energetic, isn't he? Sitting side by side on a bench with a view of Henry, we take turns looking at an email. Look at this photo. In the photo, Ken is participating in a festival, smiling together with the locals. A stark contrast to his previously troubled expression. That's good to hear. You won't be troubled by the past anymore. Truly. Half of it was the fear I had conjured up myself. It seems to have vanished somewhere after facing Emily. Daddy! Henry waves at us enthusiastically. All right, here I come. Tom dashes off after him. And I watch the two of them. Now and in the future too. Don't serve my family cheap meals. Bob said as he threw the homemade food I brought into the trash can. I never thought he would do something like this, and all I could do was watch.
Hey, what are you doing? Why would I let you serve us your cooking?
Bob replied with a smile. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. To me, wasting food, no matter who made it, is unthinkable.
You're the worst.
Even as I muttered that, I managed to smile.
But it wasn't me who made it.
What? Bob stopped laughing and looked puzzled.
Then, who did? It was made by Julie's grandparents,
Henry said, popping his head out from behind me. Bob's expression changed upon seeing him.
Why are you here?
I'm Julie, a 28-year-old working in a restaurant. This restaurant is run by my grandparents. And someday, I dream of taking it over.
Grandpa, please teach me that secret recipe today. It's still too early for you, Julie.
Our restaurant is famous for Grandpa's special dishes and Grandma's delicate cooking. Both are so popular that we're packed with customers every day.
Julie really is all about cooking.
Indeed.
But I wish she'd do a bit more housework besides cooking.
For the record, my parents have jobs unrelated to cooking. Dad is a company executive, and Mom works part-time in an office. Dad, who was raised on this restaurant's flavors, can hardly cook. That's why both my parents and grandparents say it's okay if I don't take over the restaurant. But I love the food here.
Grandpa and Grandma are so cool.
Really? If Julie says that, I'll have to try even harder. I loved watching my grandparents cook. They even taught me simple dishes I could make as a child, which I then served to my parents. This is delicious. Julie, you're a cooking genius, really delicious. Julie might become a better chef than us. They praised me enthusiastically. From that day, I dreamed of becoming a chef. And now, that dream has evolved into taking over my grandparents' restaurant. That's why I went to culinary school and am now training under my grandparents. What's different from before is how strict my grandparents are with me as an apprentice.
Julie, we're not going to coddle you just because you're our granddaughter. Once you're an apprentice here, you'll be treated just like everyone else.
That's fine. I'd rather you be strict with me. But I accepted this gladly, knowing it was for my benefit. And so, I work in the restaurant, enjoying a good relationship with my grandparents and the staff. You guys are as usual. Henry's contribution has been significant. He recently started working here and is currently a waiter. His dream is to create delicate flavors like Grandma. So, he observes Grandma's cooking in his spare time and researches with me.
Would you like to talk with me for a bit?
One of our regulars approached me one day. His name is Bob. He started coming to the restaurant for work and has been a frequent visitor ever since. I'd like to talk to you more. After saying this, he gave me his contact information, and we started communicating privately. Until then, I had only been interested in cooking. So, his responses made me very happy. My grandparents watched over me with a bit of worry. Talking with Julie is so much fun. Would you like to date me? Following his confession, we started dating. Later, he proposed, and we became engaged. Until that moment, I was truly happy.
Hey, since we're at it, why not move in together?
After getting engaged, Julie and Bob started living together. Originally, I was living alone in an apartment near the restaurant, and then he moved in with me. Living together made me think more about marrying him. However, reality was not as sweet as I had imagined. I'm home.
Welcome back.
Hurry up and get dinner ready. When I got back from work, Bob would demand dinner without even looking at me. He claims to be running a company, which originally belonged to his father, my father-in-law, to be. A few years ago, his father had to be hospitalized due to health issues, and Bob took over in what seemed like a generational shift. However, since his company mainly operates remotely, Bob works from home. Because of that, he's always at home. But he doesn't do any housework at all. Housework is a woman's job. It's not something a man should do. He seems to think. So, he rarely does any chores. Not just cleaning and laundry, but even meals must be prepared by me, or he gets grumpy. For lunch, if I don't have leftovers ready, he'd complain, "Why didn't you make anything?" Because of that, I had to go out to buy something. Thus, I spent my days running around between work and chores, growing increasingly tired. My complaints about Bob didn't stop there. "This place is in Julie's name, so it makes sense for Julie to pay," he'd say, making me cover rent and utilities. Honestly, I began to wonder if marrying him was the right choice.
It's cold today, so the roads might be icy. Be careful, Julie. Thank you, Bob.
It wasn't all bad. Bob would always escort me and be kind to me outside. He also likes my cooking and says it's delicious. I like the way he looks when he enjoys my food, so despite some doubts, I continue the relationship.
Julie, are you okay? You seem tired, aren't you?
Seeing me like this, my grandparents voiced their concern. I shook my head in response.
I'm fine.
I wanted to believe in Bob a little more. That's why I kept my worries to myself.
Really? But remember, you can always talk to us.
I nodded sincerely to their words. Up to that point, I truly loved him, blinded by love.
Hey, Bob, shouldn't we start planning our marriage soon? Yeah, we should.
A bit later, I brought up the topic of marriage to Bob. However, his response was vague, and he didn't provide any concrete plans.
We should set a date soon. Any time I'm off works for me.
His indifferent attitude was evident whenever I tried to advance the conversation. Since he works from home, he doesn't have fixed days off. So when I asked him to share his schedule for planning, he'd send me his days off via message. There was a day off that coincided with the restaurant's day off.
How about we choose this day? All right, got it.
Bob agreed to my suggestion. We decided to first visit his parents, and then on the next day off, we'd visit my parents.
Just thinking about the introduction makes me nervous.
I awaited the day with a mix of excitement and anxiety. But then, the day before, something happened.
I'm going to be nervous tomorrow.
Why? Bob asked, genuinely puzzled by my statement.
Because tomorrow is the day we're going to your parents' house for our marriage introduction, remember?
Oh, I forgot. I have a meeting with someone from work tomorrow, so let's reschedule.
What?
I was shocked by his words, and Bob looked annoyed.
My work relies on trust, so visiting at my parents' house will have to wait.
How about we go to my parents first then? That won't do. It's a priority to visit the husband's parents' house first. Despite my objections, Bob wouldn't budge. As a result, the visit to my parents' house was postponed to what was originally supposed to be the visit to his. I communicated this to my mother with a sense of resignation.
Well, that's disappointing, but it can't be helped.
My mom said she'd talk to my dad for me. I was expressing my gratitude when she asked, worried, "I heard from you folks, are you really okay?" It seems she had heard from my grandparents and was concerned. Though I had told my grandparents I was fine. My mom's question made me waver in my decision to marry. Up until recently, I could overlook Bob's faults and truly wanted to trust him. But now, I find myself focusing on his negative aspects, contemplating calling off the marriage.
Julie?
Brought back by my mom's voice. I shook my head to clear the negative thoughts.
I'm thinking of using the marriage introduction to decide. All right, I understand. But remember, whatever happens, your dad and I, as well as your grandparents, are here for you.
She reassured me before we hung up. I had hoped to build a happy family with Bob.
Everything's going to be okay, right?
Yet, I found myself doubting. The next day. I'm leaving. Bob left the house in high spirits. Seemingly happier than when we go on dates, leaving me feeling uneasy.
Huh, what's this? A smartphone?
My eyes landed on a smartphone left atop the shoe cabinet. Thinking I had time.
Huh?
I picked it up when I saw a notification from a woman saying, "Can't wait to see you." I froze, and then another message appeared.
Let's hurry up with the wedding plans.
The word wedding sent my mind spinning. What's this? What was Bob's relationship with this woman? Just then, the front door opened.
Huh? Julie?
Bob seemed surprised to see me at the entrance. But his expression quickly changed when he saw his smartphone in my hand.
Did you see it?
Oh, I noticed your smartphone and thought I'd bring it to you. Then the door opened, and you scared me. I replied quickly, and he visibly relaxed, returning to his usual kind smile. Thanks, he said, taking the smartphone from me. After he left, I collapsed on the spot.
No way!
I couldn't shake off a bad feeling. That day, I could do nothing but sit in the living room, overwhelmed by thoughts. What's wrong? Bob eventually came home, asking gently. I managed to smile. I guess I'm just tired.
How about we go out to eat today?
He suggested, acting as if everything was normal. That's why I wanted to believe in him. However, the next day at work, someone approached me, revealing a shocking truth. Shocked but resolved, I decided it was time to act. On the day of the marriage introduction, I decided to bring homemade food since it was around noon.
Can you come directly to my parents' house? I'll be staying over there from the day before,
Bob had said, not offering to accompany me. So, I went to the address he had given me. This is the right place, isn't it? It was my first visit to his family home, and I hesitantly rang the doorbell. Bob greeted me with a smile, which eased my nerves. Welcome. What's that? Oh, it's homemade food. I prepared a special menu for today, I said. His face soured at my words. He let me in, but his parents were nowhere to be seen.
Hey, where are your parents?
Oh. As I was confused, Bob took the bag of homemade food from me and marched to the kitchen. What are you? Before I could finish, he took out the food and aimed it at the trash can.
Don't serve my family cheap meals.
With that, Bob threw the homemade food I had brought into the trash can. I never imagined he would do something like this, and all I could do was watch.
Hey, what are you doing?
Why would I let you serve your cooking to someone like you? Bob answered with a smile. Bob answered with a smile to my words. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. To me, wasting food, regardless of who made it, is just unthinkable. You're the worst, I muttered, yet I managed to smile.
But I wasn't the one who made it. What?
Bob stopped laughing and looked puzzled at my words.
Then who did? It was made by Julie's grandparents,
said Henry, stepping out from behind me. Bob's expression changed upon seeing him.
Why are you here? Well, because I'm also a son of this house,
Henry replied with a smile. In fact, Henry was Bob's brother and the one who revealed the truth about Bob.
Actually, Bob is my brother, and he tried to crush my dream.
Originally aspiring to be a chef, Henry planned to attend culinary school, just like me, but was forcibly put into Bob's company. Though given the title of vice president, he was essentially burdened with running the company. Despite being young and often underestimated, Henry was busy every day.
But all the credit went to the president. That's why I finally snapped.
He submitted his resignation and fled from both the company and home, eventually finding refuge in our restaurant.
Since then, every day was fulfilling until Bob showed up.
Worried about being dragged back or harassed, he learned about my relationship with Bob and decided to return to this family home before the marriage introduction.
I never thought my parents didn't know anything about the marriage,
he said, surprised that our in-laws were unaware of our plans or the upcoming introduction. Today was supposed to be my father-in-law's doctor appointment, so they were not home. An emergency family meeting was called in their absence. As a result, they decided to meet for the introduction over a meal after the appointment, sometime before noon.
I can't believe you didn't tell Julie such an important thing.
I learned about this not from Bob but from Henry at the restaurant the other day. By then, I was already disillusioned with Bob, but I came today for the sake of his parents who made time for us.
Got a call from Dad just now. Looks like the appointment is running late.
It seems the appointment was delayed, and they hadn't returned home yet. Bob took this opportunity to throw away the homemade food. Why did he did such a thing?
Basically, you just wanted revenge on me for running away, right?
So, you don't really love Julie.
Am I wrong?
Henry's words made Bob flinch. Apparently, Henry had harbored feelings for me. And Bob, upon discovering this after coincidentally visiting the restaurant, deliberately approached me.
So, you tricked me into an engagement, but you never really loved me, did you?
That's why he treated me carelessly. Thinking it was enough to just be kind, he didn't want to spend money on someone he didn't love, hence not contributing to rent and other expenses. Of course, I was angry at him.
So, that is...
Bob struggled to find an excuse, his gaze darting around. Yet, throwing away my grandparents' cooking would cause a significant issue for him, something he seemed oblivious to as I smiled again. I'm going to make him pay. My smile was full of determination. And Henry seemed to share the sentiment, smiling similarly.
By the way, I got all of that on video.
Henry said, showing Bob the smartphone. The video displayed Bob throwing away the food. Seeing this, Bob wondered why.
Oh, did you forget? What do most people use my grandparents' restaurant for? For business.
Right.
It's well known enough that many people use it for work.
We were astounded that he still didn't grasp the situation.
You might not realize it because you only care about superficial management, but if it gets out that you threw away their food, it'll badly damage your company's image.
Henry explained. Bob finally understood, his face turning pale.
I've really done something stupid.
Just then, we heard voices and turned to see two people who appeared to be my in-laws. With stern looks on their faces, my father-in-law and a saddened mother-in-law apologized to me and gave Bob a severe look.
I was foolish to leave everything to you. Those restaurant owners have been a great help for years, used by many companies for entertainment. Being frowned upon by that restaurant means a company is in trouble.
Bob's act of throwing away food from such respected restaurant owners would likely spell trouble for his company if it became known.
I'll show this video to the restaurant owners. You'll probably be banned, and they'll talk to various companies about it. What?
Bob went pale and trembled at Henry's words. Then, he looked at me desperately.
Julie, help me!
Huh? He clung to me.
Aren't you my fiancé? I love you, Julie. Please, help me!
To his plea, I showed him a video. It was footage of Bob walking arm in arm with another woman, being affectionate.
Isn't she your real choice? You want to marry her, don't you?
His face went beyond pale to completely white at my question. Yes, Bob had another person he was seriously considering marrying. Perhaps, to him, I was the affair.
I'm calling off our engagement.
As I said this, he collapsed on the spot. Ignoring him, I talked to my in-laws.
I'm sorry for causing trouble.
Really, I'm sorry.
No, we're the ones who should apologize for causing a fuss.
Then, sent off by Henry, I went home. I packed up Bob's belongings and left them outside the apartment.
Is that all his stuff?
Yes, thank you. Taking only what I needed, I headed to my parents' house.
Thank you for all your help. I'll properly express my feelings another day,
Henry said before leaving. I couldn't help but feel a flutter seeing him off.
Henry's a good guy, isn't he?
My mother commented as she emerged from the house. My father also came out, watching Henry's back intently.
You need to improve your judgment in men, not just focus on cooking, he advised. I'll take that to heart. No need, he's there for you,
my father said, causing my mother and me to exchange glances and laugh together. Come on, let's go inside. Today, I'll be cooking.
Mom's cooking, I've missed it. Can't wait.
As I entered my parents' house with a smile, I had already received a message from Bob saying he couldn't get into the apartment, but I silently blocked his contact. Whatever happened to him was no longer my concern. That thought comforted me. A few days later, Bob rushed into the restaurant.
Julie, help me!
As soon as he saw Bob, Henry stood in front of me protectively. Ignoring Henry, Bob started rambling.
Your dad's company started it. Now one after another, contracts are being terminated.
I had of course told my father about the situation. Furious, he spoke to the president and decided to terminate the contract. My father's company, a well-known large business locally. Cutting ties meant other companies followed suit, hearing that the grandparents' restaurant was displeased with Bob.
Now my company's in dire straits. Employees are quitting one after another.
Those employees were apparently offered new jobs by my father-in-law.
Well, they were just victims caught in the crossfire. It's good they could escape from a sinking ship. Do something! You're the only one who can change this situation.
Bob pleaded. Watching him, I wondered why I ever liked him. Probably got carried away because an older man showed interest in me, amidst all the cooking.
Enough already!
Henry snapped at him. Not just him, but our staff and regulars glared at Bob too.
You're just facing the consequences of your selfish actions. And yet, you cling to Julie, aren't you ashamed? Shut up! It's all because you quit on your own. And now you're blaming me. No, it's because you never put in any effort, thinking you'd get everything because you're the president's son.
Henry vented his frustration, revealing that Bob had been raised to believe everything would go his way because of his grandparents' favoritism towards the eldest son. Meanwhile, Henry was always told to support his older brother.
That's why I've always been used as a convenient tool for you.
Growing up, Henry was burdened with troublesome tasks and robbed of any credit. The in-laws didn't share such beliefs and would scold Bob at times. However, the father-in-law was too busy and ill to keep a constant eye on him.
And you even tried to crush my dream.
Bob took over the company when Henry was still in high school. To get him into his own company, Bob deliberately caused a problem that led to the cancellation of Henry's culinary school admission. The issue was nothing more than a rumor fabricated and spread by Bob. When I heard about it, I remembered a rumor I had heard when I was about to go to school.
You know, I heard a kid from a nearby prep school got caught stealing and had their admission revoked. I think they were planning to go to the same school as Julie.
A friend had told me. It turned out that the person whose admission was revoked because of Bob's setup was Henry.
Originally, my father wanted someone else to act as the company president. But then my grandfathers intervened, never imagining it would lead to the company's bankruptcy.
His father had been ill and it was uncertain when he might have to be hospitalized, so a president's proxy had already been chosen. It certainly wasn't supposed to be Bob, who was still in his 20s. However, the chairman, their grandfathers, meddled and forcibly appointed Bob as the president, also involving Henry in the process.
Because of this, it seems the grandfathers are being heavily blamed. Shut up! It's all your fault! So, the credit goes to you, but the blame falls on me? Have you ever thought about what others would think of that?
Those words made Bob pause and look around. I'll say it again, this restaurant is frequented by business people. That means a lot of Bob's company's clients and related individuals are among them.
Guess that company's done for,
muttered a company president who was a regular at the quiet restaurant, as Bob opened his mouth to make an excuse.
You're the kind of man I never want to see again. Don't ever show your face in this restaurant or in front of our granddaughter again.
Grandparents shouted as they sprinkled salt. A gesture I thought was wasteful, but no one stopped them.
Just as my grandparents said, never appear in this restaurant or in front of me again.
I hate you.
I will make her happy. Clean up your own mess.
Our words and the cold stares from around us made Bob run away. Then, as if in approval, everyone applauded Henry, who blushed at the attention.
Well, so, would you like to go out with me?
He said, offering his hand, which I took. More applause broke out, and the grandparents smiled happily.
Henry finally spoke up. Reminds me of us back in the day. Stop it, you're embarrassing. Let's get back to work,
I said, blushing under their warm gazes, prompting laughter around us. Needless to say, Bob's company went bankrupt. He ended up with a huge debt from the compensation and lawsuits from employees Henry had replaced. His parents, unable to help him, sold their house and moved to the countryside. Thus, Bob turned to his grandparents for help. However, already aged and having lost trust due to this incident, they couldn't do anything but run from debt collectors. Watch the seasoning, Henry. Okay. Since then, Henry has been officially training under my grandmother. Just like I've been learning secret recipes from my grandfather as his apprentice. The apprentice couple is working hard today. Hey, we're not married yet. Not yet means you're planning to, right? Since that day, we've been dubbed the apprentice couple. Indeed, planning on marriage, but shy about it. I wouldn't have agreed if it were that man, but Henry, I'd entrust Julie to you. When you're truly married, let us taste the food you both make. Henry and I are living together. We left the apartment we used with Bob and moved into one Henry rented. Thus, we've been spending happy days together, returning home together and sharing household chores on weekends. You're Julie, right? One day, while returning home with him, a woman approached us. Henry and I recognized her. You're Bob's. Yes, she was the woman Bob truly wanted. Unaware of my existence, she only learned of the whole affair when Bob clung to her. She apologized to me. I'm really sorry. No worries. Please forget about us and find your own happiness. She apologized repeatedly before leaving. Should you let her off that easily? It's fine. She was another victim of Bob's lies. Plus, her messages helped me gather evidence of his affair. It was because of the message notification from her that day that I was able to conduct an investigation based on her name. I thanked her, not wanting to remember him any further. Besides, I don't want to remember him any more than I have to. Right. And so, we stepped forward towards happiness. Soon getting married. And continuing to live blissfully, thanks to Henry always putting me first. Today, we were taking a test from my grandparents. Yes, you've passed. Yes, with this taste, we can entrust the restaurant to you, said our grandparents, making us jump for joy. Finally, my dream of taking over the restaurant and his dream of becoming a chef were realized. There was also another piece of good news. Soon after, I found out I was pregnant with Henry's child. Thanks to you, Julie, all my dreams have come true. Thank you truly. All of them? Yeah, I was always disregarded by Bob and the grandfathers, so I was determined to build a happy family, to be happier than him. I smiled at his words. Indeed, his dreams had come true. Then, let's strive to be even happier together. Yeah, we've got to let our child taste our cooking too. We could talk about the future with smiles on our faces. Grateful for the days given to us by Henry, I swung my arms today again to cook.